If you like the story, you can support the author on Patreon. Link is in the description.
Chapter 126, Chapter 124, Terror-Stricken Reaction. On the opposite side of the audience, the players from 2 Academy watched the game unfold with a mix of shock and awe. Can you believe it? Midorima was in the zone, just like Aomine, Wakamatsu muttered, his surprise evident. His teammates from 2 Academy nodded in agreement. Miyoshi, with a sharp gaze, observed Kagami closely. Kagami using beast instinct just like Aomine, he thought aloud, a sense of unease creeping up on him. Could he also enter the zone? Miyoshi's expression shifted back to his usual polite smile, his eyes closing as he nodded. Well, it doesn't really matter. Aomine is getting better now. Let's head back, Miyoshi said, signaling the others to follow him. Sakurai tilted his head, looking thoughtful. Should we wait for Momoa? Miyoshi pondered for a moment. We'll probably catch her in the corridor. Let's head out. He glanced toward a certain audience section where he spotted Momoa conversing with Tsuna, Kais, and Nijimura as they made their way out of the stadium. The players from 2 Academy strolled toward the exit gate, passing through the corridor. They spotted a group of players in green jerseys coming their way. Miyoshi recognized the face at the forefront. He thought, Kirisaki Daiichi, hey. The guy leading the Kirisaki Daiichi players seemed to sense something and turned toward Miyoshi. His bored expression twisted into a sly smile as he greeted, hey there, Miyoshi. Long time, hey. Hania, hey. You're as unique as ever with your style of play. Miyoshi's expression shifted slightly as he acknowledged. He adjusted his glasses and offered his usual polite smile, but there was some hint of wariness in his gaze. Your sharp tongue hasn't dulled, Hanamiya chuckled in response to Miyoshi's sarcasm. Miyoshi remained silent as Hanamiya bid farewell, and his teammates followed him. As they left, Miyoshi narrowed his gaze and mused, Hanamiya seems to have found the perfect team for his style of play, doesn't he? Wakamatsu couldn't resist his curiosity and asked, Captain, do you know him? You could say that. Miyoshi squinted slightly and replied. Sakurai, joining the conversation, inquired, they're Seirin's next opponent, right? Are they any good? I mean, Seirin's been on fire lately, and I wonder if Kirisaki Daiichi can keep up. He was clearly interested in the upcoming match and whether it would be a tough one for Seirin. As Hanamiya walked away, Miyoshi began to speak, are you all familiar with the uncrowned kings? Everyone in 2 nodded in recognition of the term, as they had just watched one of them, Kiyoshi Teppei, play for Seirin, known as the Iron Heart. That guy was also one of them. He's known as the cowardly bad boy for his sneaky tactics and foul play. This revelation took aback the 2 players as they recognized Hanamiya's infamous nickname. So, he was the only uncrowned king who stayed away from the generation of miracles. Wakamatsu remarked, his tone carrying a hint of disdain. Miyoshi understood why they might look down on Hanamiya. He knew that Hanamiya had avoided Teiko Junior High, and his status as one of the uncrowned kings had been a subject of debate. Well, despite all that, his skills are undeniable. Miyoshi said, his expression serious as he addressed his team. He continued, his title as an uncrowned king shouldn't be underestimated. And it's not like I don't understand his reason for avoiding Teiko all the time, Miyoshi muttered quietly, recalling a disturbing image of Hanamiya in a particular restroom. The players from 2 Academy nodded in agreement, though it didn't entirely change their perspective. Miyoshi could only shake his head. Miyoshi was about to continue his stroll down the corridor when his eyes caught a striking change in Hanamiya's countenance. Hanamiya, known for his confident and audacious demeanor, had turned ashen, a stark contrast to his usual self. The sight bewildered the Kirisaki Daiichi players, leaving them utterly perplexed by this uncharacteristic shift. They shared the perplexity that hung in the air, instinctively parted to create a passage for 2 approaching figures from opposite directions. Miyoshi's widened in disbelief as he observed Hanamiya tumbling to the floor, ending up sitting on his rear in a hasty, panicked manner. With one hand, he clutched the wall beside him as if seeking solace and support from the cold surface while the other instinctively shielded his face. Kirisaki Daiichi's players, just as astounded as Miyoshi, converged around their enigmatic captain. They looked down at Hanamiya, who seemed to have lost control and was now cowering against the wall. Fear and uncertainty clung to the atmosphere, and the entire scene unfolded with an eerie sense of foreboding, leaving everyone perplexed and deeply concerned for their captain. Miyoshi's eyes narrowed, a suspicious squint hinting at a revelation as he observed Momoa's hesitancy and focused on the perplexed Kirisaki Daiichi players. His eyes darted from Momoa to the approaching figure of Tsunayoshi Kazama. His lips parted in a silent acknowledgement. Tsunayoshi Kazama. Just as I suspected, he was the cause of Hanamiya's accident a few years ago. He adjusted his glasses, his gaze fixated on the enigmatic figure of Tsuna. Hey, Hanamiya! What happened? One of the Kirisaki Daiichi players shook Hanamiya's body vigorously, desperately trying to rouse him from his state of shock. However, Hanamiya remained paralyzed by fear. As they followed Hanamiya's terrified gaze, they beheld the legendary captain from Fukuda Soo, the winner of the Inter High, Tsuna. He passed them with an air of indifference as though they were utterly invisible to him. The Kirisaki Daiichi players could sense an undeniable aura of authority and strength radiating from Tsuna. It made them slightly uneasy, but not to the extent that Hanamiya was experiencing. After all, they knew their captain's reputation for bullying others on the basketball court. Why did someone like Tsuna trigger such a strong reaction in Hanamiya? The contrast between Hanamiya's usually brazen demeanor and his current state of fear was both puzzling and disconcerting. Looking at the confusing scene before her, Momoa turned to Tsuna as she asked, Tsuna, what happened to him? Should we lend a hand and help out? Satsuki, they're just having a little fun. Let's keep moving, Tsuna offered a gentle smile, his hand tenderly patting Momoa's head to ease her concerns. He then shifted his gaze towards Hanamiya. And Hanamiya's pupils dilated in a clear display of fear as they locked eyes. Tsuna maintained a gentle smile and said, we wouldn't want to spoil their fun, right? Blushing slightly, Momoa agreed with Tsuna, even though she wasn't entirely sure about the situation. The two of them continued walking toward two academies players. As they approached, Momoa intended to inform the players that she was heading to Tsuna's residence. The idea for the day's outing had come from Kai's, and Tsuna had agreed to it. Chapter 127, Chapter 125, Kagami's Resolve. After the game ended, Kagami went to the changing room when he overheard Kiyoshi's shout. He abruptly stopped, alarmed by the shocking news of Kiyoshi's severe knee injury. Kagami clenched his fists and gritted his teeth, overcome with frustration. Standing outside the changing room, Kagami was lost in thought as his mind racing. Kagami? Why are you standing outside? Suddenly, a voice broke his reverie. Kagami turned to his left and found Kuroko looking at him puzzled. Whoa! Hey, don't startle me like that! Kagami exclaimed, surprised by Kuroko's sudden appearance. From the changing room, the sound of footsteps approached as Hyuga and Kiyoshi emerged, having packed their belongings and getting ready to leave. Kagami was feeling a bit awkward seeing them. Hey, Captain, Senior! Observing their beloved duo and Seirin, Hyuga shook his head and said, grab your things. It's time to head back. Kiyoshi smiled and said, well, I should head out first. Riko needs a hand with something. He walked away towards their coach's assistants. Kagami and Kuroko went to gather their belongings while Hyuga watched Kiyoshi's departing figure with a somber look. Afterward, the three of them left the stadium and headed for the nearest subway station. Each was about to take their own path to their respective homes. Kagami, however, found himself preoccupied with the conversation in the changing room, causing him to steal occasional glances in Hyuga's direction. Kuroko noticed this and asked, Kagami, is something bothering you? These words furrowed Kagami's brow, causing all three of them to come to a stop. Kuroko and Hyuga turned their attention to Kagami, who then questioned Hyuga with a determined look, Captain, what's going on? Why did Kiyoshi say this is his last shot? Hyuga's expression changed slightly as he let out a sigh. I see. You overheard our conversation, hey. Kuroko, who was unaware of the situation, listened with curiosity and a touch of concern. Hyuga sighed and said, I suppose it's only fair to tell you both about it, hey. He looked at the ground with a serious expression and explained the situation. At the same time, in Tsuna's house, Midorima seemed rather annoyed as he pointed at Kai's and asked, what on earth are you doing here? Kai seemed confused and tilted his head, responding, I'm the one who suggested coming over to hang out with Kazumaki. Hang out? I wasn't informed about this. Why didn't I receive an invitation? Midorima adjusted his glasses and questioned. What? You weren't invited? Then why did you show up, Midorima? Kai shot back. Midorima remained silent and averted his gaze in response to Kai's question. Why are you avoiding the question? Answer me! Kai's demanded in annoyance. Tsuna took a sip of his coffee, letting out a sigh as he relaxed. Mamois, seated nearby, chuckled at the sight, finding it rather amusing. Just then, the door burst open, and a voice echoed through the house, Tsuna. Let's do a one-on-one game. Upon hearing the shout, Tsuna let out another sigh, while Mamois's expression shifted to one of mild irritation. Meanwhile, Kai's was still engaged in a heated discussion with Midorima off to the side. Before long, Aomine walked into the room, sporting his signature grin as he addressed Tsuna. Come on, Tsuna, let's have that game now. Tsuna rubbed his temples in exasperation. He looked at Aomine and said, can we do this later? Aomine seemed a bit disappointed but shrugged, settling down on the sofa and grabbing the TV remote as if he owned the place. The group hung out in Tsuna's house for a while, discussing the recent final league. Kai's was particularly interested in Seirin's upcoming match against Kirisaki Daiichi, and he had plenty of questions. Midorima mentioned that Kirisaki Daiichi had a history of being a tricky opponent for Seirin, and they delved into their past encounters. Mamois chimed in to share the backstory of the intense rivalry between Seirin and Kirisaki Daiichi, describing their previous hard-fought match that Seirin had won. Tsuna, who do you think will come out on top this time? Midorima, fixing his glasses as he asked Tsuna about his prediction for the upcoming game while Tsuna calmly sipped his coffee. Surely you already have the answer, right? With a hint of amusement, Tsuna responded. Aomine sported a smug grin as he watched his favorite TV channel, while Mamois sat contentedly beside Tsuna on the sofa, wearing a gentle smile. Kai's let out a soft chuckle, and Midorima, donning a smirk, adjusted his glasses once more. All of them shared a similar thought. Tsuna couldn't help but smile with amusement as he contemplated the game scheduled for the next day. Despite Kirisaki Daiichi being Seirin's archenemy, he was confident that the current Kagami had the capability to overcome their tricks. That is if he could stay calm, Tsuna muttered to himself as he recalled Kagami's fiery personality. After their conversation, Aomine couldn't contain his excitement and asked for his one-on-one match. Kai's eagerly joined in. Mamois's eyes sparkled with anticipation, seeing this as an opportunity to analyze Tsuna's skills and potentially gain an advantage for their team. Tsuna seemed to sense Mamois's intention and chuckled. However, the outcome was clear: both Aomine and Kai's were soundly defeated by Tsuna in their one-on-one matches. Meanwhile, Kagami couldn't fall asleep after reaching his home. Restless, he decided to head to the nearby street ball court, conveniently located just around his apartment, to blow off some steam through basketball. As he played, the memories of his recent conversation replayed in his mind. It was about how Seirin came into existence and their journey through the High preliminaries, which was a tumultuous one. They battled fiercely in each round, culminating in a hard-fought final victory against Kirisaki High. However, this triumph was marred by the injury that befell Kiyoshi, which was indirectly caused by Hanamiya's actions. Kiyoshi's hospitalization meant he'd be away for at least a year. In the final league of the preliminaries, they faced the formidable Three Kings of Tokyo, unable to secure a victory. Understanding all of this frustrated Kagami to no end. I can't stand seeing those expressions again. He could vividly picture the distress, panic, and helplessness that had taken over their opponents today as he continued to dribble the ball. Recollections of the day's game rushed back to him, and he recalled witnessing that very same expression when Midorima had completely altered the course of their match. That's why. His gaze was unwavering, fueled by a determination that refused to let those pained expressions repeat as he dribbled it forward to the basket. Within his eyes, an unusual fire sparked, igniting a newfound sense of resolve deep within his soul. I promised to myself that no matter what. At that moment, Kagami might not have realized it yet, but his eyes were blazing with intense, fiery red sparks as he soared toward the hoop. With a powerful leap, he executed a thunderous dunk, sending shockwaves through the street. He looked at the ball, now bouncing on the ground, and declared, "This time, we're taking the tournament." In another part of Tokyo, Aomine opened his eyes suddenly as he felt something. Did he walk in now? He smirked as he sat up from his sleeping position as he gazed out of the window. Things are getting interesting, hey. Chapter 128, Chapter 126, eagerly awaiting the Winter Cup. The next day was the decisive moment of the final league, determining who would advance to the next stage of the Winter Cup. Two critical games were scheduled for the day, Shudoku vs. Senshinkan and Seirin vs. Kirisaki Daiichi. Midorima stepped onto the court and couldn't help but glance at the neighboring court, where Seirin would face off against Kirisaki Daiichi. Takao approached from behind, his casual posture and curiosity evident as he asked, "Something on your mind?" Midorima adjusted his glasses and responded, "You're kidding, Takao." His sharp eyes swept across Seirin's players, and he couldn't help but fixate on Kagami, who seemed remarkably composed. There's something different about him. Midorima sensed a change, a newfound strength in Kagami. He wore a more serious expression as he quietly acknowledged, "He's Tsuna's fellow disciple for a reason." "Hey." Takao, curious about Midorima's muttered comment, asked, "What did you say just now?" Midorima dismissed the matter, looking away from Kagami. "It doesn't matter. The game on the other court is over." Takao was taken aback. "Wait, how do you know that?" he inquired. The question was echoed in the audience among the Kaijo and 2 Academy players who came to watch the game. In Kaijo's section, all eyes turned to Kai's for an explanation. Kai's, who had noticed Kagami's transformation, turned to Kirisaki Daiichi and said, "It seems like they're feeling down for some reason." Kasumatsu, having observed the expressions of Kirisaki Daiichi's players, commented, "You're right, they do seem a bit down." He had always seen them as sneaky and underhanded, so their expression didn't surprise him at first, but now he noticed something more in their eyes. At 2 Academy, Miyoshi mentioned the same thing and elaborated, "It looks like Hania still can't shake off the fear from last time." Sakurai, puzzled, asked, "Fear? Is it related to when the Fukuda Soo captain met them in the corridor?" As Miyoshi mentioned Tsuna, both Aomine and Momoa redirected their focus towards him, their curiosity piqued. Miyoshi expressed his surprise, saying, "It's rather surprising that both of you didn't know about this." Momoa, still intrigued, asked, "So, is Tsuna connected to that person's strange reaction yesterday?" She remembered Hanamiya's fearful response upon seeing Tsuna as if he had encountered a ghost. Aomine displayed his interest by raising an eyebrow, signaling that this was new information to him. Miyoshi nodded and observed Hanamiya's somber demeanor as he continued, "I was wondering why you weren't there during the game 3 years ago. But in that match, Hanamiya employed his infamous tactics against Kazama." "Ah, that game. We were on a school trip at the time." Tsuna decided to skip it, which allowed him to attend the game. Momoa's eyes widened as the realization struck her. "I see, it's all coming together," Miyoshi nodded, grasping the situation. He continued, "The Chieko players were so furious that their captain was nearly punched Hanamiya in the face. Luckily, Kazama intervened in time." Momoa and Aomine acknowledged that this incident likely influenced Najimura's decision to step down as captain and pass the role to Tsuna. "Kazama managed to pacify and took control of the team as he defeated us. But the story doesn't end there," Miyoshi said, his eyes slightly widening as he fixed his gaze on his team. Miyoshi's usual polite smile vanished as he continued, "After the game, we discovered Hanamiya beaten up in a restroom, utterly terrified. We suspected Kazama was behind it, but we had no concrete proof." Momoa's eyes widened in shock, and she instinctively covered her mouth in disbelief. Aomine, on the other hand, simply shrugged, convinced that Hanamiya must have done something deserving of such treatment, given Tsuna's character. "What? That guy did such a thing?" Wakamatsu couldn't hide his surprise at the revelation. The others in 2 shared similar sentiments. Sakurai said fearfully, I thought he appeared decent, even if he had a somewhat intimidating presence." "That was surprising." Miyoshi couldn't help but scoff at Sakurai's comment. "Surprise? Fukuda Soo Academy was a pretty rough school, you know." He had conducted some research after discovering Tsuna's affiliation with the school and was quite taken aback by his findings. "And that guy, Tsunayoshi Kazama, pretty much ran the whole show there. Nijimura, who was essentially in charge, was like his right-hand man," Miyoshi added. Upon hearing this, Momoa's expression shifted to one of concern for Tsuna's well-being. However, the subsequent revelation brought some relief. Nevertheless, she couldn't resist texting her worries to Tsuna. Sakurai's face paled as he said, "Wow, they were all delinquents." "Well, that's interesting." Aomine nonchalantly spoke, capturing everyone's attention. He noticed their stares and frowned, asking, "What's with the looks?" "Aomine, you bastard. You didn't seem to be surprised by that." Wakamatsu couldn't hide his surprise as he looked at Aomine, who appeared rather nonchalant. Aomine just shook his head and turned his attention to the basketball game that had just started, stating, "Why should I be surprised? Tsuna was always a formidable fighter back in Tiako. Him taking down some troublemakers doesn't shock me." Miyoshi also found Aomine's lack of surprise interesting. He shook his head and focused on the game, reflecting, some troublemakers? He practically ruled the whole school, though. He couldn't help but feel goosebumps as he continued to watch the match, thinking, even someone as formidable as Akashi from the Generation of Miracles didn't wield as much influence over the entire school as Kazama does. Back in the game, Shudoku swiftly gained the upper hand, and there was a noticeable surge in Midorima's energy. Atsubo observed Midorima returning to his position after making one of his signature long-range three-pointers. He wondered, he's really pumped up for some reason. What could it be? The rest of the Shudoku team shared Atsubo's curiosity, and they were clueless about the source of Midorima's newfound enthusiasm. However, Takao, who had heard Midorima predict Seirin's victory solely based on Kagami, had some insight. He leaned over and shared with Atsubo, "He's on fire because of Kagami." They then glanced to the other side of the court, where Seirin was playing against Kirisaki Daiichi. Their eyes widened in surprise, catching something unexpected. 18-4 already. The game had just entered the midway point of the first quarter, and those scores surprised them. Still, their scores were already trailing at 21-8, but that was because of their main source of points, Midorima. On the Seirin side, everyone's eyes were fixed on Kagami with a mixture of awe and disbelief. The entire team was brimming with energy, and even their captain, Hyuga, seemed to have caught the fervor. He was taking shots repeatedly, though most were not finding their mark. But something was amiss. Since when did he become so level-headed? Hyuga wondered aloud, surprised by Kagami's unusual calmness on the court. Kagami's transformation was not just a newfound composure but a complete shift in his approach. He effortlessly maneuvered through Kirisaki Daiichi's dirty tricks and fouls. Kuroko couldn't hide his astonishment as he watched Kagami's intense determination. He couldn't help but smile and mutter, as expected, "You truly deserve to be my light, Kagami." Midorima, who was on the court, and Kais and Aomine, along with their respective teams in different parts of the stadium, couldn't contain their smirks as they witnessed Kagami's outstanding performance. Their excitement was palpable, and it fueled their anticipation for the next stage of the tournament. The Winter Cup is quite exciting, hey? Midorima thought to himself, a satisfied smile gracing his face. Chapter 129, Chapter 127, I Am Absolute. The tension in the stadium was palpable as the two games drew to a close. The final buzzers rang out, sealing the victories for Shudoku and Seirin. The crowd couldn't contain their excitement. They erupted into a chorus of cheers and applause. Wow! Midorima is incredible. Seirin is on fire. Kagami's skills are insane. The energy in the arena was electric as the fans couldn't help but express their amazement at the level of play they had just witnessed. The final scores were in, and the results were nothing short of astounding. Shudoku had delivered a crushing defeat to Sen Shinken, once considered one of the formidable three kings of Tokyo. The scoreboard displayed 127-56 in favor of Shudoku. The audience couldn't contain their thrill at witnessing such a dominant performance. Seirin, on the other hand, who had been getting narrow victories up to this point, had a remarkable score of 110-82, thanks to Kagami's exceptional performance and the shadowy support of Kuroko. The spectators were still excited, unable to stop talking about the incredible game they had just witnessed. Aomine's eyes focused on Kagami, and a thought crossed his mind, looks like I wasn't mistaken. What I sensed yesterday was right. He had sensed long before that the door separating the Generation of Miracles from the rest of the world had been shattered, but the intruder hadn't yet been qualified to enter. However, observing Kagami now, Aomine recognized the person who had breached that barrier. What's more, Kagami had not just broken through the door, he had entered the room and stood before them, the Generation of Miracles. Aomine couldn't help but muse, Tetsu's found himself quite an exceptional teammate, hasn't he? A confident grin played on his lips as he pondered this. In another part of the stadium, Kais fixed his eyes on Kagami as he pondered the same thoughts. A smile gradually spread across his face. Kasumatsu noticed Kais's sudden smile and frowned, asking, "Why are you grinning like that out of the blue?" "Oh, it's nothing really." He chuckled and said, "I'm just more excited for the Winter Cup now." Kasumatsu shook his head in response as they walked out of the stadium. After the final league to determine the teams advancing to the Winter Cup, there was a 2-week break before the tournament began. In the following 2 weeks, Fukuda Soo underwent intense training in Tokyo, utilizing the private gymnasium provided by Tsuna. Alexandra occasionally joined them as their coach, focusing on specific aspects per Tsuna's requests. As Alexandra reviewed the data on her hand, she remarked, it was quite challenging for the rest of them actually to use that. No, this should be sufficient. Tsuna was also examining the data closely. Alexandra shrugged and said, well, if it meets your standards, then I suppose I've done a good job. Tsuna smiled, appreciating her dedication. Captain, I've progressed with this technique during the past 2 weeks. Mochizuki approached Tsuna, excitement in his voice. Tsuna raised an eyebrow at Mochizuki's quick progress on that technique. Good job. Make sure you can apply it in the Winter Cup. Mochizuki nodded seriously and went back to his training. Observing Mochizuki's departing figure, Alexandra remarked, he's made impressive strides in such a short time. Tsuna nodded, pleased with Mochizuki's progress. He had suggested that Mochizuki learn a new technique, recognizing the young man's exceptional agility and how well it suited his quick feet and build. Tsuna was confident that Mochizuki could master it. With a grin, Tsuna added, Alan would be surprised when he sees this. Meanwhile, not just Fukuda Soo but the other teams that had qualified for the Winter Cup were also stepping up their training. Schools like Shutoko High, 2 Academy, Kaijo High, Ruzen High, and even Ruzen High were intensifying their preparations. Seirin High had also organized a special training camp, enlisting Aida's father's help, Kage Tora, a seasoned basketball trainer and a former player of the national team. With his expertise as a professional trainer, he was sure to help Seirin significantly improve their skills and teamwork. Having joined the training camp, Kagami anticipated further improvement in his skills. Meanwhile, on the western side of Japan, within a modern gymnasium, the air was filled with the sound of heavy panting as 3 basketball players lay sprawled on the polished wooden floor, their faces edged with exhaustion. Their gazes were fixed on a red-haired teenager who stood before them, frozen in disbelief. Their training regimen had shifted significantly after their humbling defeat in the Inter-High, and their progress had been remarkable. However, you're just a monster, Sei. Mibuchi finally found his breath and spoke, his voice trembling with exhaustion and a tinge of fear. They had just engaged in a 1v3 match against Akashi. Their battle was not even fierce as the outcome was obvious. They had been thoroughly defeated. Nebai lay on his back, his gaze fixed on the ceiling as he reminisced about their recent showdown. He slowly turned his head to meet Akashi's cold, piercing eyes, a shiver running down his spine. Nebai couldn't help but think, we're the uncrowned kings, yet he defeated us as if it were child's play. He's a true monster. Akashi stood above them, casting an intimidating shadow. His voice was as frigid as his gaze as he addressed the uncrowned kings, his teammates. I forgave your previous failure, considering you were up against Tsunayashi's pawn. The words sent chills down Kotaro's spine. He was a player who relied on pure instinct, and his instincts were on high alert as he cowered in fear. Akashi's cold demeanor left them all feeling uneasy. I don't expect much from your performance after losing that game. Akashi's voice cut through the air like a blade, slow and deliberate. Now tinged with red sparks, his eyes bore into the uncrowned kings with a chilling intensity. The room seemed to shrink in the shadow of his presence as an overwhelming pressure enveloped them, making them feel like mere insects before a giant. Under this terrifying gaze, they felt a stifling pressure enveloping their whole being. Akashi spoke with unwavering authority, I would rather not use this card, as if I really had to use them. They knew the weight of that card, and the implication sent shivers down their spines. That means you are no longer useful to me. Akashi took a step closer, and the air grew even heavier. His voice echoed with self-assuredness, I am more than enough to defeat anyone who dares to stand before me. Because I am absolute, and no one can challenge my authority. Chapter 130, Chapter 128, The Opening Ceremony. 2 weeks flew by, and now the Yaiji Gymnasium in Tokyo was buzzing with anticipation. The excited chatter of people discussing the upcoming Winter Cup echoed through every corner of the gymnasium. Whoa! It's even more packed than during the Inter-High. Aguilera exclaimed, surveying the crowded space. Of course. It's a major high school basketball tournament. The winter one keeps getting bigger each year, and this time, it's the grandest stage in the history of Japan's sports tournaments, Nijimura explained, and everyone nodded in agreement. Tsuna walked silently at the front, with Nijimura by his side and the rest of the team trailing behind them. "Hey, Captain, where's our coach?" Mochizuki suddenly asked, realizing that Alexandra was nowhere in sight. Tsuna continued walking, replying casually, "She's crashing at her student's place." Alexandra had mentioned heading to Kagami's for a sleepover. Tsuna figured she might be sleeping in after a night of heavy drinking. He shook his head at the thought and led the team into the gymnasium. Meanwhile, in another corner of the stadium. "Aomine, did you even get any sleep?" Wakamatsu asked, noting Aomine's constant yawning and bloodshot eyes. Momoa sighed. Aomine was too hyped up, eagerly anticipating a showdown with Tsuna. She walked over to Aomine, who raised an eyebrow in confusion. "What?" "Nothing," Momoa smiled innocently before smacking Aomine on the back of his head. Aomine staggered, turning to her in disbelief. "Why? I get you're pumped to face Tsuna, but Kmen." Momoa scolded, puffing her cheeks in annoyance. "We've got Seirin first." "But you said we're in the same bracket." Aomine complained. Momoa had mentioned being in the same bracket, getting Aomine all hyped up and sleep deprived. "Yeah, I did, but we're like 4 matches away, you dummy." Momoa couldn't hide her frustration. Sure, they were in the same bracket, but they had a few rounds to go before facing off. Momoa just couldn't wrap her head around Aomine's excitement. She sighed, "And Seirin won't be a walk in the park, you know that, right?" Even if Aomine dismissed Momoa's data, he could definitely see Seirin's improvement with his own eyes. The last game in the final league of the preliminaries showcased it clearly. "Easy, Momoa," Miyoshi said calmly. Turning to Aomine, he added, "You can still deliver, right?" Aomine scoffed, a clear sign that he was confident in beating Seirin. Wakamatsu didn't appreciate Aomine's attitude and was ready to snap. Luckily, Sakurai stepped in, holding Wakamatsu back. Everyone at 2 Academy was used to Aomine's demeanor, so they shook it off and headed into the gymnasium. "Whoa! These are all the teams the media's been talking about." Kagane expressed his amazement. Seirin had entered the gymnasium a while ago. However, "Where's Kagami?" Aida fumed, noticing Kagami was still missing. "Kagami said he's lost on the path of life." Izuki relayed Kagami's response. The entire team went silent, then collectively turned to Aida. She smiled gently, and they all started sweating nervously. "Ha ha ha, lost on the path of life, hey? He's quite the poet. Should I guide him to find his way to God?" As everyone nervously chuckled, Kuroko visibly flinched, thinking, "Rest in peace, Kagami." Their banter halted abruptly when an audible gasp swept through the team and the audience. All eyes turned toward a team entering the court, sporting white jackets with a touch of light blue and black. "Their presence is imposing." Kasumatsu spoke after scrutinizing them closely. Kai's nodded, fixing his gaze on the one leading the team before adding, as expected of the Emperor of Creation, Ruzen High. It wasn't just their aura. Some of them had encountered those players before, and they could instinctively sense that Ruzen had grown even stronger since the Inter High. Ruzen has evolved since the Inter High, hey. Atsubo, witnessing Ruzen's entrance onto the court, remarked. They would likely face them later because they are in the same bracket as Ruzen. Yet, it didn't dampen their spirits in the slightest. Atsubo smirked, saying, "But who said we haven't improved too?" The other members of Shudoku smiled in agreement. Everyone in 2 Academy shared a reassuring smile. Despite Ruzen's imposing appearance, their confidence remained unshaken. Miyoshi observed his teammates with contentment. Well, no need to worry about Ruzen at the moment. However, as soon as Ruzen made their way in, everyone's eyes widened in disbelief as an instinctual sense of intense pressure enveloped them. All heads turned sharply towards the entrance, where an overwhelming aura seemed to emanate. Midorima's eyes flashed with recognition. Aomine's bored expression morphed into excitement, his grin widening. Kai's chuckled, shifting his focus from Ruzen to the entrance gate. And Murasakibara was absorbed in devouring the snacks he had managed to sneak into the stadium. Even Akashi had turned his attention to the entrance, a subtle shift in his nonchalant expression. As soon as a group of players walked in, the crowd cheered excitedly. "It's Fukuda Soo. Wow, they look pretty formidable. No wonder they won the Inter High. Do you think they'll take this tournament too?" "I'm not sure, but their game should be exciting to watch." The crowd buzzed with conversation as Fukuda Soo entered the stadium where the opening ceremony for the Winter Cup took place. Their strong presence and distinctive red jackets with a hint of black made them easily noticeable in the bustling crowd. It's strange. Kasumatsu observed the players from Fukuda Soo, his expression serious. Kais, too, noted the peculiarity, sharing a significant glance with Tsuna. Just what on earth have you done, Kazumaki? He pondered. On Shudoko's side, Takao tilted his head inquisitively. Why was it strange? They've obviously won the Inter High. Midorima began, his gaze fixed and serious. But why do they feel like a starving beast? Imioji mentally exclaimed, breaking into a sweat. It was peculiar. Winning a tournament usually brought a sense of fulfillment, the feeling of a seasoned warrior who had endured many battles. But Fukuda Soo exuded a different aura. They seemed like seasoned warriors starving for more battles. Imioji couldn't help but shiver with disbelief as he gazed at these players and muttered, and we're in the same bracket, hey. Aomine paid no heed to the other Fukuda Soo players. His focus was solely on Tsuna, who strolled nonchalantly. A smirk crept across Aomine's face as he thought, I'll beat you this time, Tsuna. Meanwhile, on Rakuzen's side, Akashi's gaze was fixed on Tsuna. His entire demeanor shifted, sending a shiver down his team's spines. The memory of the inter-high humiliation lingered, a wound in Akashi's pride. Seijuro Akashi, unyielding in his authority, wouldn't forgive anyone who dared challenge him. Certainly not Tsunayoshi Kazama. With a determined thought, Akashi declared, I shall repay the humiliation tenfold, Tsunayoshi. Rakuzen will claim the trophy this time, for I am absolute. Chapter 131, Chapter 129, A Gathering of Miracles. The Winter Cup's opening ceremony concluded in a blur of anticipation. The initial restlessness in the crowd transformed into palpable excitement as the prospect of the first games loomed. I'm telling you, Two's got this one in the bag. Shudoko is also playing, though. I'm so excited. But hold on, the other game is where the real action is. Fukuda Soo, the inter-high champions, are hitting the court. Take a look. Two academies going head-to-head against Seirin today. Excitement and buzz filled the stadium, a chorus of voices eager to witness the unfolding events. While all of the generation of miracles would be playing their first round matches today, the most anticipated clash was between Titans 2 Academy and Seirin. The atmosphere was charged with anticipation for this thrilling encounter. Amidst the middle of these excitement. Ugh! Where is Kagami? Aida exclaimed, the exasperation was clear in her voice. She was thoroughly frustrated. Her irritation was palpable. Despite Kagami's earlier assurance of being on his way, he was conspicuously absent before and even after the opening ceremony. Her anticipation had turned into frustration, and Aida couldn't hide her vexation. Seirin players exchanged wry smiles seeing their coach's frustration. Izuki attempted to pacify the situation, he mentioned he's on his way. He should be here soon. Kuroko, however, felt a vibration in his pocket. Retrieving his phone, he stood up and approached Aida, a sense of urgency in his calm demeanor. Coach, I'm going to leave for a while, Kuroko stated with his usual expressionless face. Hearing this, veins bulged out of Aida's temple. She grabbed Kuroko's head, shaking it furiously, all the while speaking gently, a stark contrast to her actions. Our first years have been very daring, hey? Come and leave as they please, such audacity. Kuroko stumbled around with Aida's hand shaking his head, trying to maintain his balance. He broke into a sweat as he explained, I was summoned. Summoned? Aida stopped her hand, tilting her head in confusion. Kuroko took a step back, creating a bit of space, and casually adjusted his hair. Yeah, I'm heading to meet Akashi. Wait, Akashi from Ruzen High. Hyga exclaimed, eyes widening in surprise. The others murmured Akashi's name, recognizing him as the former captain of the Generation of Miracles. Aida sighed and conceded, fine, do your thing. Kuroko expressed his gratitude before making his way out. Watching Kuroko leave, Aida turned to Furihata, a first-year player, and requested, Furihata, could you stick with Kuroko? I don't want a repeat of Kagami's disappearing act. Make sure he's back before our match. Furihata nodded with a wry smile and hurried to catch up with Kuroko. Meanwhile, on the other side of the stadium. Captain, where are you off to? Aguera inquired, noticing Tsuna about to leave. The others turned their attention to Tsuna immediately at Aguera's question. Tsuna calmly spoke, I'm going out for a while, I have to meet some people. Hearing this, Nijimura stood up as well as he was about to follow Tsuna. However, Tsuna shook his head as he spoke, I'm going alone, Shuzo. Nijimura frowned at this, however, knowing Tsuna's personality, he would likely not going to take back the order, so Nijimura just shrugged his shoulder as he sat back down. Right outside of the gymnasium, there were 3 teenagers wearing different jerseys sitting on the stairs. The dark blue-haired teenager was playing with a basketball in his hand as he noticed 2 people joining them as he spoke, what is this? Tetsu, why are you bringing a babysitter along? Kuroko, who had just arrived with Furihata, replied, sorry to keep you guys waiting. However, before Aomine managed to say more, the purple-haired teenager who was eating a chocolate bar suddenly spoke, Mine-chin, don't you have S.H.in as your babysitter? Satsuki got nothing to do with all of this, Murasakibara. Aomine frowned at this. The blonde-haired teenager tilted his head as he spoke, well, that's not important, but Midorimaki, why do you have a scissor with you? Midorima scoffed at Kaisa's question as he spoke, it's obviously my lucky item, you idiot. It's dangerous though, please don't walk around with that. Kais rolled his eyes in response. Wah! Are all of the generation of miracles are all here? Meanwhile, Furihata, who was in the middle of these conversation, was terrified. Just their pressure alone already made him felt so weak that his legs almost gave out. Seriously, I wanna go home. These guys are terrifying. Kais sighed as he complained, why is the one who called us here hasn't arrived yet? However, as soon as he spoke that, steps were heard as they all turned toward the one who had summoned them all. Sorry that I've kept you waiting, I'm glad to meet you all again, but... Aomine just clicked his tongue at Akashi's tone that wasn't so apologetic. Furihata suddenly felt a tremendous pressure coming at him as Akashi suddenly turned toward him as the guy suddenly addressed him, there is someone who doesn't belong here. I wish to speak only to my former teammates. Sorry, but, could you leave us? Furihata widened his eyes at this, he really wished he could leave at the moment, but he just couldn't move his body at all. He looked down on his feet and saw it was trembling. Come on, man. You're no fun. Don't exclude us. Just as Furihata opened his mouth, a hand suddenly was placed atop of his shoulder as the pressure suddenly lifted away from his body. Kuroko turned to look at the person as his eyes widened in surprise. Kagami. Kagami nodded at Kuroko before turning back to Akashi as he spoke, you're Akashi, hey? Glad to meet you. Akashi was nonchalant, but his eyes flashed with a ruthless light as he walked down the stairs. Shintaro, could you give me your scissor? Sure. Midorima didn't know what Akashi was about to do, but he just shrugged his shoulder as he handed over his lucky item. With the scissors in hand, Akashi approached Kagami, asking, you're Kagami, right? Kagami was ready to respond, but suddenly, Akashi thrust the hand holding the scissors towards Kagami's face. In disbelief, Kagami swiftly leaned to the side, avoiding the thrust. However, he widened his eyes as another figure quickly appeared at Akashi's side, grabbing his wrist and preventing the scissors from reaching Kagami. Akashi turned his gaze to the person who intervened, saying, Tsunayashi, hey. Akashi swatted Tsuna's hand away, causing the scissors to fall to the ground. Midorima looked on disapprovingly as it was his lucky item. His nonchalant expression had shifted into a frown after Tsuna's intervention. Easy there, Seijuro, Tsuna said casually, his face reflecting nonchalance. His eyes briefly flickered to the fallen scissors before returning to Akashi. I just saved you from a potential lawsuit for attempted murder. You should be thanking me instead of giving me that expression. Seeing Akashi's reaction, Tsuna couldn't help but chuckle. Chapter 132, Chapter 130, My Promise. Akashi shook his head at these words, taking the scissors from the ground to trim his bangs slightly. What the hell was he thinking? It would have been fatal if Kazama hadn't stopped that, and Kagami couldn't dodge that. Furihata exclaimed in his mind. His face turned pale as he witnessed the confrontation. This is so scary. At this moment, he realized that it wasn't only his legs that were trembling. His whole body was shaking. Though no more words were exchanged, the pressure in the room was palpable, and Furihata's legs finally gave out. Are you all right, Furihata? Thankfully, Kagami was there to catch him, or he might have embarrassed himself by falling to the ground. Ah, thanks, Kagami, Furuhata spoke nervously. Kagami nodded, glancing at Akashi with a serious expression. He was sweating, realizing that Akashi was definitely out of his mind. Taiga, where's Alex? Tsuna asked suddenly, breaking the ice. He hadn't received any messages from Alexandra, and since she was staying at Kagami's place, he figured Kagami might know. Kagami's expression shifted, and he scratched his head awkwardly. Oh, she's still sound asleep. Well, it's Alex we're talking about, so it's not surprising. Tsuna sighed, not entirely shocked by this. He then glanced at Furuhata's state before saying, however, it would be better if you bring your teammates back. Staying here for too long won't do him any good. Kagami frowned, ready to address Akashi regarding his seemingly hostile act. However, seeing Furuhata's condition made him sigh, deciding to prioritize helping his teammate regain his footing. Turning to Kuroko, Kagami said, I'm gonna go first, take care. Kuroko nodded in acknowledgement as Kagami walked away with Furuhata. Well, I was about to leave immediately if Tsunayoshi didn't come. Akashi said, returning the scissors to Midorima. Aomine frowned, expressing his displeasure, don't joke around like that, Akashi. I was just about to remind you all about the oath we made in Tiako, but it seems like you all remembered, so it was pointless. Akashi responded. He then turned to Tsuna, adding, and the other reason for me inviting Tsunayoshi over was to tell him about the oath we made. Tsuna just shrugged nonchalantly at Akashi's words. Akashi broke it down for everyone, saying they hated being lumped together as the generation of miracles. They were a powerhouse, but there was no real way to know who was the best among them since they never faced off with their own squads. So, they made an oath. They decided to square off in high school competitions to settle the score and determine who had the most games. As Akashi spilled the oath, a serious vibe took over. All eyes shifted to Tsuna, waiting to see how he'd take the news. Tsuna shrugged and said, well, that's kinda cute, I guess. His response didn't sit right with the generation of miracles. Dissatisfaction hung in the air as they shot him looks. But Tsuna held his ground, not bothered by the disapproving gazes. I just wanted to remind you about my promise, Tsuna said, and everyone except Akashi was surprised. Kai's, looking a bit puzzled, tilted his head. On the other hand, Aomine, Midorima, and Kuroko understood what Tsuna was talking about. They clearly remembered Tsuna's promise from 3 years back. But Aomine, wearing a frown, couldn't help but point at Murasakibara, shouting, I get Kai's not knowing, but why are you tilting your head too? My bad. I don't really remember, Murasakibara apologized with a nonchalant shrug. Tsuna just lightly smiled at Murasakibara's answer. I made that promise when you snagged that fancy matcha chocolate from the convenience store. Murasakibara's eyes lit up, and he instantly remembered what the promise was all about. Kai's looked really impressed at how Tsuna made Murasakibara recall his promise. Akashi, drawing everyone's attention, said, those bold words of yours from 3 years back, hey. Shaking his head, he ascended the stairs, hinting at their departure for the gymnasium. Sure, give it a shot. But I'll warn you now. Your promise will be pointless in front of me. Tsuna shot back with a smirk, my promise still stands. Midorima, catching that expression, frowned. He couldn't help but think, he's so confident as usual. I gotta admit, I doubted you all could step up enough to make me take you seriously, Tsuna stated matter-of-factly. Aomine and Midorima didn't like hearing that. Aomine frowned and said, Tsuna, I get you won the inter-high, but I didn't expect this level of arrogance from you, hey. Tsuna shook his head and said, Daiki, you can't even make me go all out. It's like when you got tired of always winning and stopped giving your best. I've been getting bored too because I couldn't go all in with you all being too weak, Tsuna declared, and everyone turned their focus to him, sharp looks in their eyes. Their expressions got serious, taking it as a direct challenge. Akashi, particularly displeased, watched with a cold expression. He radiated this intense pressure that made the others frown, stealing glances at Akashi, whose eyes, now surrounded by a red ring, added an extra layer of intensity. Tsuna chuckled at their reactions, opening his arms wide. Exactly. Bring it on. Give me your best shot. Show me everything you've got. And in return. His playful expression shifted into deadly seriousness. A powerful aura emanated from Tsuna, sending a tingling sensation through the generation of miracles' souls. He declared, I'll prove to you that there's a much grander stage out there and how you were so small in comparison. Aomine started with a small laugh that quickly escalated into full-on laughter. That's the spirit. I'll beat you just like you're asking for, Tsuna. Ha! I'll be the one to take him down. Aomine, focus on your match against Seirin first, Midorima scoffed, jabbing a finger toward Kuroko, who looked determined. But I'll be facing him before both of you, so I'm claiming the victory first, Kai said, considering that Kaijo was likely to meet Fukuda Soo in the third round of the Winter Cup. Murasakibara, busy munching on snacks, looked less bored as he glanced at Tsuna. Ruzen High was also in the same bracket, and there was a high chance of facing off in the second round of the Winter Cup. Akashi, showing no emotion, just shook his head coldly and walked away, saying, "Fine, have it your way." Chapter 133, Chapter 131, King of Kings, Fukuda Soo. Watching Akashi depart, Tsuna shook his head and then turned to the rest of the group. He offered a casual farewell before heading off, saying, "Well, it's not like we haven't met in ages. I'll catch you later." His eyes briefly lingered on Aomine, a silent thought passing through his mind, "Let's see what you've got this time, Daki. Don't let me down." The day's highlight was only the showdown between Seirin and two Academy. Tsuna noticed that Aomine had stepped up his game since the inter-high. Yet, it wasn't just him, Kagami had reached a level where he stood shoulder to shoulder with the Generation of Miracles. Aomine caught Tsuna's gaze and smirked before making his exit. The rest of the group also went their separate ways. As Tsuna entered Fukuda Soo's assigned changing room, he sensed their enthusiasm. Despite not facing a renowned team featuring the Generation of Miracles, there was an undeniable excitement in the air among the Fukuda Soo players. As Tsuna strolled in, all eyes turned towards him, a sense of anticipation evident on their faces, eager for guidance. Tsuna, however, simply offered a light smile before directing his attention to Nijimura. "Did you share their players' info with the team?" Tsuna inquired. Nijimura affirmed with a nod. Tsuna then faced his own teammates and briefed them, "Our opponents today are the well-known Fukuoka Daiichi from the southwest. They've got a sturdy defense. But let's be real, our offense is on another level, right?" He grinned, and a shared expression of confidence swept across the team. For Fukuda Soo, the first round was just an appetizer, a taste of what they aimed to devour the entire tournament to satisfy their insatiable hunger. Tsuna looked satisfied as he looked at his team, explaining a straightforward plan for the upcoming game. He then shared a simple plan with his team. He deliberately avoided the complexity of strategies. Tsuna wanted everyone to fully relish the appetizer, recognizing that the joy of it lay in building anticipation for the main course. Miyoshi kept an eye on the stadium clock in the spectator seats, muttering, "It's about time." Their showdown with Seirin was scheduled for the afternoon. Instead of idling away in their changing room, the team preferred to catch the matches leading up to theirs and scope out their potential opponents in the next round. Aomine strolled in at that moment, having just wrapped up the meeting. Mamois, curious, asked, "How did the meeting go, Aomine?" "Ah, nothing special," Aomine replied casually as he sat. He yawned, saying, "I just want to get on the court already." His eagerness stemmed from a desire to overcome Seirin, anticipating a rematch against Tsuna swiftly. Mamois didn't like what she heard from Aomine, and a frown creased her face. She couldn't shake off Kagami's vastly improved data since their last encounter, and a bit of worry clouded her thoughts. However, the announcer's sudden call for the entrance of Fukuoka Daiichi interrupted her concerns. "Ladies and gentlemen, brace yourselves for the upcoming display of skill from a team that's been making waves along the southwest shores of Japan." On Shudoko's side, a hush fell over everyone as they attentively observed the Fukuoka Daiichi players emerging from the entrance gate making their way onto the court. They've made their way from the lively city of Fukuoka, and let me tell you, their journey has been nothing short of extraordinary. Kagami, sporting a recent slap mark on his face, watched seriously. He'd just been informed that this would be Tsuna's game. "Get ready, folks, as we introduce the emerging stars, the powerhouse from the southwest, the team that's been forging their path to glory, Fukuoka Daiichi." The crowd erupted in cheers at the entrance of Fukuoka Daiichi's players. Surveying the Fukuoka Daiichi players, Haiga, standing beside Kagami, remarked, "They're a bunch of strong players, aren't they? Just as expected in the Winter Cup." Seirin, like two Academy, opted to watch the matches leading up to their own game. "Those guys are pretty tough, But Kai's remarked as he observed from the neighboring court. Their first round Winter Cup matches were scheduled around the same time as the Fukuda Sogo vs. Fukuoka Daiichi game. Kasumatsu remained silent, fully aware of what Kai's was hinting at. He silently nodded in agreement, keeping his eyes on the opposing entrance gate. Ladies and gentlemen, brace yourselves for a team that has risen through fierce competition, a formidable force that has recently emerged. The announcer's words echoed through the stadium, igniting a frenzy of cheers from the crowd. The excitement spread like wildfire as everyone anticipated the upcoming game, aware of the powerhouse approaching the court. The newly crowned king who conquered the mighty Ruzen High, the Emperor of Creation. As the excitement in the stadium peaked, Fukuda Sogo's players began to step into the limelight, emerging gradually from the entrance gate's shadows. The entire vibe in the stadium shifted, capturing the focus of every team present, including the formidable generation of miracles and their respective squads. All eyes remained fixed on the figure leading the charge for Fukuda Sogo. Despite his nonchalant expression, an undeniable air of authority surrounded him as he moved forward, commanding attention throughout the arena. The players of Fukuda Sogo behind him wore expressions that hinted at an eagerness to step onto the battlefield. It was as if they were not just a team but a legion led by a king, ready to conquer new territories. Fresh off their triumph at the Inter-High tournament, I bring you the unstoppable dark horse and reigning champions, King of Kings, Fukuda Sogo. As the announcer's voice filled the stadium, there was a noticeable shift in the air. A surge of energy pulsed through the venue, unmistakably signaling the arrival of the newly crowned champions as they claimed their spot in the spotlight. They're on a whole different level compared to their opponent, Izuki couldn't help but mutter. While Fukuoka Daiichi might have some strength, they seemed entirely overshadowed by Fukuda Sogo. The onlookers, witnessing their lineup for the pre-game formalities, couldn't help but feel the same. The contrast in presence was undeniable. Tsuna exchanged a handshake with Fukuoka's captain, and they both returned to their respective positions on the court. With both teams ready, the referee tossed the ball into the air. A collective breath held in anticipation, every player on the court displayed a heightened sense of focus. Bodies tensed, eyes locked on the ascending ball, players from both sides leaped in unison, reaching to seize control. Tsuna observed the unfolding action, thinking to himself, let's savor the appetizer. Chapter 134, Chapter 132, a bit too excited. Mochizuki secured the jump ball and promptly passed it to Tsuna. Without waiting for Tsuna to start dribbling, the entire Fukuda Sogo team surged forward with eagerness, drawing a chuckle from Tsuna as he noticed their enthusiasm. Tsuna began dribbling down the court, and Fukuoka Daiichi's point guard quickly moved to defend him. The guy shouted confidently, "The King of Kings or whatever, will win this. I like your confidence, but it's not enough." Amused by that, Tsuna responded. He then increased his dribbling pace, catching the opposing player off guard and widening his eyes in disbelief. However, that wasn't the end of the play. Tsuna swiftly made a move to the right, leaving the Fukuoka Daiichi player struggling to keep up, and he could only watch helplessly as Tsuna effortlessly broke through his defense. Responding quickly, Fukuoka Daiichi's team adapted to the situation. One player, initially marking Hizaki, left his post to obstruct Tsuna's path to their basket. Tsuna, nonchalant in his approach, casually dribbled around as the player positioned himself in front, assuming a defensive stance. As Tsuna maneuvered, he couldn't help but acknowledge the determination reflected in the expressions of Fukuoka Daiichi's players. Observing the defensive effort, Tsuna mused, his form isn't bad, I guess there's a reason they made it to the Winter Cup. Unfortunately for them, Tsuna had no intention of going solo. He casually passed the ball between the legs of the Fukuoka Daiichi player defending him, directing it to Hizaki. The opposing player could only widen his eyes in disbelief at the swift pass, realizing it was too late to react. Hizaki, seizing the opportunity, smirked and leaped for a dunk, slamming the ball through the hoop. Yes, this is it. Finally, after such a long time. Hizaki laughed aloud, his eyes fixed on his trembling hand that had just delivered the powerful slam. His joy was palpable. Aguilera shared in the excitement for his best friend and felt a surge of determination to score in the next play. Fuck, that quick pass is unexpected. One of the Fukuoka Daiichi players cursed under his breath. The captain of Fukuoka Daiichi shook his head and encouraged his team, all right, don't let it bother you. The game has just begun. That's what he thought until he realized the entire Fukuda Sogo team had stationed themselves in their defensive zone, applying continuous pressure. This revelation made him widen his eyes in disbelief, muttering, "What on earth, it's only the first quarter, and they're already pulling moves like this." Typically, such tactics were reserved for later quarters when a team had gained momentum, ensuring they could maintain their lead by pressuring the opponents. Are they not worried about burning out too early? The captain frowned. However, as he glanced at each Fukuda Sogo player, a chill ran down his spine. It felt as if he were being scrutinized by predators relishing the prospect of capturing their prey. "They seem like total savages," Takao remarked, his surprise evident as he observed Fukuda Sogo's aggressive play. Fukuoka Daiichi found themselves powerless in this situation. Almost every player from Fukuda Sogo appeared possessed, relentlessly aiming to score without a care for their physical well-being. In response, Fukuoka Daiichi called a timeout, but they opted to let Fukuda Sogo continue, recognizing the potential advantage if their opponents tired themselves out early. Midorima adjusted his glasses, maintaining a keen gaze on the game. He commented, "Their stamina doesn't seem depleted at all." In fact, he noticed that with every successful shot, the excitement among the Fukuda Sogo players grew, as if scoring had been a long-lost joy for them. He couldn't help but turn to Tsuna, the only seemingly composed player on the Fukuda Sogo team, thinking, "What on earth have you done to them, Tsuna?" As the first quarter concluded, Fukuoka Daiichi looked on in disbelief, checking the scoreboard only to find they hadn't scored a single point. It read 30-0, with Fukuda Sogo dominating the scoreboard. "Don't worry, they should tire out soon," Fukuoka Daiichi's coach reassured, observing the heavy breathing of Fukuda Sogo's players. The rest of Fukuoka Daiichi concurred, interpreting Fukuda Sogo's players' heavy breathing as a sign of fatigue. Meanwhile, Tsuna couldn't help but cover a part of his face, feeling a bit dumbfounded as he observed his teammates. "Are you guys like beasts or something?" he exclaimed with a sigh. Tsuna had initially thought their labored breathing indicated fatigue, but mid-game, he realized they were just getting overly enthusiastic. Fukuda Sogo's players frowned, turning their attention to Tsuna. Tsuna shook his head, addressing them, "Don't let the excitement get to you, this is just the appetizer." "Or, do you believe this is sufficient?" Tsuna asked with a stern tone, catching everyone off guard with the question. Even Nijimura furrowed his brow before cautiously responding, "No, this isn't enough." Their training camp in the States had limited opportunities for them to score on their own, with Tsuna usually taking the lead. Finally, experiencing the thrill of making baskets after such a long time in an official game left them electrified with excitement. However, "I'm with you, this won't be enough," Aguilera declared as he steadied himself, determination shining in his gaze. The rest of the team echoed similar sentiments, and Tsuna nodded in satisfaction. He spoke, "Exactly, this is just the beginning. So, let's gear up for what's coming." Tsuna's smirk conveyed his confidence as he looked ahead to the challenges yet to unfold. As the second quarter began, Fukuoka Daiichi was horrified to find that Fukuda Sogo's players, who they thought were tired from their aggressive play, now had composed expressions. Instead of exhaustion, it seemed like they were facing a group of seasoned soldiers. "Poor people, I feel bad for them," Kais couldn't help but express his sympathy as he observed the events unfolding on the neighboring court. However, Kasumatsu abruptly kicked him, causing Kais to tumble to the ground. "Why do you always do that? This is physical abuse!" Kais exclaimed, frustration evident in his voice as he promptly stood up to confront Kasumatsu. Kasumatsu, seemingly unimpressed, responded with a piece of advice, "Don't lose your focus by looking around, we have our own game, you idiot." All right," Kais sighed, acknowledging the pointlessness of arguing with his captain. Shaking his head, Kasumatsu watched as Kais took his position. He then shifted his gaze to the court where Fukuda Sogo and Fukuoka Daiichi were engaged in a game, muttering with a serious tone, "It's going to be a massacre over there." Chapter 135, Chapter 133, Fueling the Hunger. As the second quarter unfolded, Fukuoka Daiichi began to understand that the cool-headed players of Fukuda Sogo were applying even more intense pressure than their wild performance in the first quarter. Feeling the strain, they decided to call for another timeout. "They've improved since the last game," Mibuchi remarked, earning nods of agreement from the other uncrowned kings. But when Mibuchi glanced at Akashi, who appeared unimpressed, he couldn't help but smile a bit and added, "Well, we've improved too." The coach of Fukuoka Daiichi wore a concerned expression as the team focused on him. Glancing at Tsuna, he thought, that captain is the key to their attack strategy. It was evident to them, considering that most of the balls reaching their defensive formation were directed through Tsuna. The precision with which Tsuna distributed the ball at the right moments and his decision-making skills showcased Fukuda Soo's seamlessly synchronized gameplay. Realizing that stopping him was impossible unless they assigned more players to defend against him, the coach sighed. Fukuoka Daiichi's coach acknowledged that things weren't unfolding as expected. He turned to his team and instructed them to double-team Fukuda Soo's captain. Meanwhile, on the Fukuda Soo's bench, Nijimura cast a brief glance toward the Fukuoka Daiichi's bench before turning to Tsuna with a question, "Do we need to adjust any of our strategies?" Tsuna shook his head, eyes scanning his teammates, who seemed fully absorbed in the game. "Looks like they realized their plan to tire us out didn't work. So, I suppose it's time for them to put 2 players on me. Should we stick to our plan then?" "I doubt their double team can stop you, Captain," Agiwara suggested. The consensus rippled through the team as everyone nodded in agreement. They had witnessed Tsuna facing off solo against the Jabberwock. Even though Tsuna faced a tough time, the sheer pressure he applied made the Jabberwock cooperate to stop him. It was a surreal experience for the Fukuda Soo team. "No, let them believe their plan is working for a bit and start scoring from the outside," Tsuna advised as he turned to Mochizuki. Anticipating that Fukuoka Daiichi might underestimate Mochizuki, Tsuna saw an opportunity. Mochizuki hadn't revealed much during the first quarter, making it the perfect timing for Fukuda Soo to execute their strategy. Mochizuki grinned in anticipation, having waited for this exact moment. He had significantly enhanced his accuracy and expanded his shooting range. While not as extreme as Midorima's, he was confident he wouldn't miss a single shot. "But ease into it, don't unveil your new skill just yet. We'll keep it as a wild card for future games," Tsuna advised Mochizuki, who nodded in agreement. As the game resumed, Fukuoka Daiichi stuck to their plan, deploying a double team on Tsuna, just as Fukuda Soo had anticipated. Despite Fukuoka Daiichi's attempt at a double team, Tsuna effortlessly passed the ball to his teammates. The double team had inadvertently created a significant gap in Fukuoka Daiichi's defense, providing Fukuda Soo with an advantage. Recognizing that their double team strategy had not played out as anticipated, frustration was evident on the faces of Fukuoka Daiichi's players. "Well, at least we managed to hinder their captain from navigating easily through our defensive line," Fukuoka Daiichi's captain muttered as he dribbled the ball. In the stands, Seirin observed the game with a serious expression. "Fukuoka Daiichi got played with like that," Hyuga remarked, adjusting his glasses with a thoughtful touch. The rest of the Seirin team silently nodded in agreement, their attention fixed on the ongoing game. Kiyoshi couldn't help but murmur, "Kazama hasn't even revealed his fangs yet, and they're effortlessly dominating their opponent, hey." The realization dawned on everyone that Tsuna intentionally directed the game by feeding the ball to his teammates instead of showcasing his prowess. Izuki checked the scoreboard as the second quarter concluded, and the referee's whistle echoed through the stadium. "They're called the King of Kings for a reason. It's not just their captain, the entire team consists of top players." Kuroko and Kagami wore serious expressions as they observed the unfolding game. For Kuroko, witnessing Agiwara's significant improvement was particularly striking. He couldn't help but place his hand over his heart, feeling a mix of happiness and wariness. He was pleased to see Agiwara continue playing and growing stronger after their middle school tournament. However, a sense of caution arose, knowing they now stood on different teams, playing the same position. Kuroko's eyes glinted with determination. "This time, we will not lose." They glanced up at the scoreboard, unable to conceal their disbelief. The score now stood at 63-3. "They're really strong, hey? And we're up against them in the same bracket." Kagane couldn't help but mutter, making his thoughts audible to everyone. Aida frowned, concerned that these results might dampen their spirits, especially with their upcoming match in the afternoon. She turned to her team, saying, "Stay focused, guys. We've got our own game this after." However, her words caught in her throat as she noticed their lack of discouragement. Instead, she sensed an unusual excitement. A smile crept onto her face, realizing that not only had they grown physically but also mentally stronger. On Shudoko's side, Takao couldn't resist asking Midorima, "Shin, why didn't that Kazama guy do much besides passing to his teammates? You must have noticed during the opening ceremony how they seemed." Midorima frowned, adjusting his glasses. Takao and the rest of Shudoku nodded in agreement with Midorima's observation. To them, Fukuda Soo's players looked like they had been starved for a long time, which was odd for recent tournament winners. It must have something to do with Tsuna, especially since this time it was like he was just giving them an appetizer. Midorima speculated, glancing at the scoreboard. A similar inquiry seemed to be circulating at Tu Academy. Miyoshi narrowed his eyes with seriousness as he asked, "Imagine, how would you feel if I gave you a small taste of an appetizer when you're starving?" This question left Wakamatsu scratching his head in confusion. Not being the sharpest tool in the shed, Miyoshi's question felt like a tricky puzzle to him. "It would just make you hungrier," Momoi muttered to herself in realization. Aomine was not particularly interested as he yawned, thoroughly bored by the one-sided games on both courts. Kai's dominated one game, and Fukuda Soo dominated the other. Miyoshi nodded in agreement with Momoi's insight as he said, "Exactly. Such a devious way to feed someone," he thought to himself as Tsuna's image flashed in his mind, giving him goosebumps all over his body. Chapter 136, Chapter 134, Ruthless Ascension. As Fukuda Soo stepped into their changing room, the door swung open, and there stood Alexandra, who had been absent since the opening ceremony. "How's the game?" Alexandra inquired. "Don't worry, coach. We've got it under control," Aguilera replied with a confident smile. Tsuna shook his head at Aguilera's reassurance. Alexandra wasn't expressing concern out of worry but rather as a coach checking in on her team, a natural part of her role. Tsuna turned to Hizaki, "Let's throw a wrench into their game plan in the next half." He wanted Hizaki to disrupt Fukuoka Daiichi's rhythm. "And Ishida, you're up next. You're taking Mochizuki's spot. We're going to step up the pace." He then guided Ishida with clear instructions about his role and position, highlighting the need for a quicker tempo. The plan was to accelerate their rhythm in the next half, considering that relying too much on three-pointers could slow them down, so Tsuna was taking Mochizuki out. Tsuna's eyes gleamed. In the upcoming half, they aimed to elevate their performance. Hizaki grinned, eager to showcase his skills, especially with Kaijo on the other court. Watching Kai's playing still made his blood boil with anger. The room buzzed with anticipation, hinting at an exciting shift in the game. Observing the scene, Alexandra nonchalantly remarked, "Well, it looks like you guys had it covered without needing my assistance. You should take a bit more rest, Alex. I know you're still dealing with the hangover," Tsuna said calmly as he got up. Alexandra winced at Tsuna's words, giving a wry smile to the others, who looked at her with disbelief. Coach, were you drinking last night?" The others couldn't help but ask. They knew that Alexandra wasn't always the most reliable figure outside of basketball, but the idea of her drinking before a tournament was surprising. As expected of an American. "You're really different." Aguilera nodded in understanding. He found it fascinating how carefree she could be. She massaged her temples and slowly spoke, "Being American has nothing to do with my personality, but whatever, I'll nap here then. Wake me up later." Tsuna shook his head at this, standing up and saying, "Let's get back to the court." The break between the first and second half was about to end, and they needed to return to the court soon. As both teams stepped back onto the court, Fukuoka Daiichi appeared resolute, eager to regain some semblance of control in the game. "They're not giving up yet," Midorima observed, studying the expressions on Fukuoka Daiichi's players. Atsubo and the rest of the team agreed, acknowledging the courage displayed by their opponents against a formidable adversary. However, as the third quarter kicked off, Fukuda Soo began to accelerate, leaving Fukuoka Daiichi's players struggling to keep up. "Looks like they're about to finish them off, hey?" Aomine commented, bored, and the sentiment resonated with everyone at Tu Academy. Miyoshi adjusted his glasses, glancing at Hizaki, who had seamlessly disrupted Fukuoka Daiichi's moves for Fukuda Soo's rapid-paced play, leaving their opponents helpless. Observing Tsuna, who faced a double team, Miyoshi noted, their entire strategy centers around him. No wonder they're doubling down on defense. Double team or not, it's futile against a monster like that. As anticipated, once Hizaki disrupted Fukuoka Daiichi's rhythm, Tsuna elevated his performance, effortlessly maneuvering through the double team as if it were a mere inconvenience. To stop a monster, you need another. Miyoshi pondered, shaking his head as he glanced at Aomine. Looks like the game's in the bag, hey? Miyoshi rose from his seat, addressing his team, time to prepare. We're up against a formidable opponent this time. With unanimous agreement, everyone at Tu Academy stood up, trailing Miyoshi to their assigned changing room. Seirin made their way to their assigned changing room in another section of the stadium. No point dwelling on Fukuda Soo now. We've got a major game ahead, Hyaga said as they walked. Kagami nodded in agreement, muttering, "Yeah, can't get that guy out of my head since the hot spring encounter." After successfully advancing to the Winter Cup following their final league preliminaries, they celebrated in a hot spring. There, they encountered two Academy, their first-round opponents. Kagami's eyes brimmed with determination at the thought of Aomine. "This time, I'll come out on top." "Kagami!" Kuroko called out to Kagami, who seemed lost in thought. Startled by the voice, Kagami's eyes widened, and he turned to face Kuroko. Noticing the curious gazes of others, he questioned, "Why is everyone staring at me?" Hyaga adjusted his glasses and walked up to Kagami, delivering a smack to the back of his head. Kagami staggered, annoyed. "What was that for? Don't stop abruptly when we're walking, idiot!" Hyaga scolded, delivering another well-placed smack. Feeling embarrassed, Kagami accepted the smack and resumed walking with the team. He shook his head, realizing he had unknowingly halted. With a smile aimed at his teammates, he thought, "It's not just about me. We're taking down two Academy." Kagami stated in his mind with a newfound determination. As Shutoko exited the stadium, Midorima couldn't shake off the thought of facing Tsuna in the future. His gaze shifted to the area where Ruzen High was seated, and he muttered, "But first, I need to defeat Akashi, hey." Adjusting his glasses, he glanced at his teammates, a small smile forming on Midorima's lips. The players from two Academy, Seirin and Shutoko marched away from the stadium, their determination evident in every step. Simultaneously, the stadium erupted into an even greater frenzy. Holy cow! Can someone put an end to this madness? They're absolutely dominating Fukuoka Daiichi. The scoreboard displayed a staggering 95-5, a testament to the overwhelming performance of Fukuda Soo. "It's just the third quarter, for heaven's sake. This has got to stop." Despite the sympathetic murmurings for the struggling Fukuoka Daiichi, there was an undeniable sense of anticipation in the air. The spectators were not just witnessing a game, they were part of an exhilarating experience. Back on the court, Tsuna observed the opposing team while sitting on the bench with his team. They seemed fired up at the beginning of the second half, but now it appears they've given up. The members of Fukuda Soo also picked up on that. They empathized with their opponents but couldn't hide their disappointment. "Pathetic," Hizaki remarked. "You're right," Agiwara concurred with his best friend. Despite being laid back, his time in the US has given him some profound insights. Turning his attention to their opponents, Agiwara remarked, "Basketball isn't a game for the weak-minded." Hizaki responded with a disdainful click of his tongue at Agiwara's comment. "Well, that's progress." Tsuna chuckled, observing Hizaki's muted reaction to being addressed in such a manner by Agiwara. "It's a shame they gave up, but we need to wrap this up," Tsuna declared with a cold glint in his eyes. Everyone in Fukuda Soo nodded in agreement. There was an unspoken understanding that they wouldn't ease up just because their opponents had thrown in the towel. In their eyes, sentiments like mercy had no place on the court. It might seem ruthless, but in their philosophy, the stronger ones conquer. Chapter 137, Chapter 135, Seirin High vs 2 Academy. What a way to start the tournament! The resounding cheers and gasps echoed in the stadium, creating a palpable buzz reverberating through the crowd. As expected of the King of Kings, the acknowledgement rippled through the audience, a recognition of the undeniable prowess displayed by Fukuda Soo. This is simply a massacre. The atmosphere was charged with a mix of shock and amazement as the magnitude of Fukuda Soo's domination became starkly evident. The crowd's cheers soared despite the chatter, filling the entire stadium. Their collective gaze was fixed on the imposing scoreboard, which declared a staggering 127-7 unapologetically. The numbers alone told a tale of utter dominance, and the crowd couldn't help but be captivated by the sheer spectacle unfolding before them. Fukuda Soo's performance had turned the game into a one-sided affair, leaving Fukuoka Daiichi players and supporters alike in a state of disbelief. Tsuna observed his teammates' expressions, and a smirk formed on his face. Assessing each one, he noted their hunger for more. He mused, "Good, keep that hunger. Beating a small fry shouldn't satisfy your appetite." Nijimura, though content with their first-round victory, wasn't particularly enthusiastic. The win felt so-so, given the lackluster quality of their opponent. "It's not cutting it, hey." He sensed a similar sentiment among his teammates. Shaking his head, Nijimura turned his thoughts to the impending face-off against the other generation of miracles. Excitement welled up in him as he clenched his fist. The real challenge lay ahead, with the current opponents serving more as a warm-up for the team's true strength. A somber atmosphere enveloped the arena as both teams lined up in the customary post-game formation. The air seemed heavy with the palpable weight of defeat, and the crowd could sense that Fukuoka Daiichi was grappling with the harsh reality of their loss. The defeated players, heads hung low and eyes devoid of their usual spark, exuded an unmistakable aura of disbelief. Fukuda Sogo's players showed no hint of empathy as they glanced at the defeated Fukuoka Daiichi players whose eyes lacked any spark of life. The audience, witnessing this, collectively shook their heads in regret. "Those poor guys," meeting Fukuda Sogo in the first round, remarked a teenager with a mole under his right eye. His slick, black hair and a longer side-swept fringe covering his left eye complemented his white jacket with a touch of purple, bearing the label Ruzen High. He turned to a purple-haired teenager munching on snacks beside him, asking, "Atsushi, do you think we stand a chance against Fukuda Sogo?" A furrow formed on Murasakibara's forehead, and a faint frown edged across his face at the question. "Moro-chin, I don't like the question," he finally muttered, his displeasure evident in his tone. Himuro was undeterred as he let out a light chuckle at Murasakibara's response. "Why? Are you afraid?" Himuro's question carried a playful undertone, prompting Murasakibara to turn toward him with a hint of annoyance. "I'm not afraid of anyone." Still grumbling, Murasakibara shifted his gaze toward Tsuna, his expression softening just a fraction as he continued, "Besides, it was Tsuna-chan who taught me something." The mention of Tsuna injected a surprising note of reverence into Murasakibara's usually nonchalant demeanor. "He taught you something?" Himuro's genuine surprise was palpable, breaking through the casual banter. Yet." Murasakibara nodded, reminiscing about their hanging out at Tsuna's place before the inter-high final. He casually munched on his snacks, then adopted a serious tone. "He taught me that I hate losing more than anyone, so I'm not afraid of him because I don't want to lose against him either." Murasakibara harbored a unique fear reserved solely for Akashi. Despite the resemblance between Akashi and Tsuna, Murasakibara found Tsuna more approachable. And the crucial factor for him was that Tsuna could provide him with various rare snacks that were otherwise hard to come by. Himura raised his eyebrows, his eyes showing curiosity as he turned to look at Tsuna, a name he had often heard. "So, Tsunayoshi Kazama is not only popular in LA but also in the Japanese basketball scene, hey. I'm really excited about facing you on the court, Tsunayoshi Kazama," he added with a smile, genuinely looking forward to playing against such a renowned player. As Fukuda Sogo and Fukuoka Daiichi left the court, after a quick cleaning on the courts, the crowd started to get agitated once again as the next game was between Seirin High and 2 Academy. The anticipation in the air was palpable as the announcement of the match between Seirin High and 2 Academy reverberated through the stadium. "Finally! We have a strong team facing each other." The exclamation echoed the collective sentiment, a shared appreciation for the prospect of witnessing two formidable teams go head-to-head. "You idiot, every single team in the Winter Cup was strong, it's just that a team with the Generation of Miracles and that newly crowned King of Kings were just on a different level." A counterpoint emerged, injecting a note of realism into the fervor. The acknowledgement of the Winter Cup's overall strength didn't dampen the excitement but rather added a layer of perspective. The mention of the Generation of Miracles and the King of Kings hinted at the star power that elevated certain teams to a league of their own. "Hey? Are you implying this would be one-sided as well? 2 Academy has the ace of the Generation of Miracles, you know." "Well, I'm not sure about that, but I have zero doubt 2 Academy would win this. They've beaten Seirin before, they'd do it again this time." Chatter buzzed through every corner of the stadium, with fans speculating on the outcome of the match between Seirin High and 2 Academy. Given their history, many seemed to favor 2 Academy. As the Seirin players made their way through the entrance gate to the court, the crowd erupted into cheers, surprising the players. "Whoa! Are they cheering for us? It looks that way. We've become quite a famous team." Kiyoshi chuckled at the freshman's remarks, shaking his head. "Sorry to break it to you, but most of them are probably here to see our opponents." As soon as Kiyoshi spoke, the crowd's cheers erupted even louder as 2 Academy made their entrance. "Whoa, they're finally here. Look, it's Aomine. The ace of the Generation of Miracles." Excitement rippled through the crowd as 2 Academy stepped onto the court. Chapter 138, Chapter 136, the blossoming players. Seirin players observed their opponents, 2 Academy, with serious expressions on their faces. We should have expected this. True. It's unlikely that we're that famous. I thought they were cheering for us. Seems like 2 Academy is quite the crowd favorite. The freshman let out sighs of realization. Aida dismissed their conversation with a shake of her head, saying, "All right, everyone, time to focus." Hyuga and Kiyoshi followed suit, removing their jackets. Kagami had already taken off his, and his gaze was fixed on Aomine across the court. Aomine's expression remained calm, but his eyes betrayed a hint of excitement. Kagami sensed the challenge, fully aware that Aomine had grown even stronger since their last encounter. Yet, instead of being discouraged, Kagami felt invigorated. He, too, had undergone significant improvements. The stage was set for an intense showdown. Kuroko picked up on Aomine's changes, saying, "I didn't sense much off the court, but once we're on it," his aura felt more intense. His expression shifted to seriousness, realizing Aomine had become even more formidable. Turning to his team, Kuroko managed a light smile, thinking, "Nevertheless, this time, we're not going to be defeated." As both of the team went up to the court to line up for the opening formality, Aida smiled as she sensed confidence oozing from every single one of them. They looked especially dependable today, she spoke with a smile on her face. The stadium buzzed with excitement as the anticipation for the game reached its peak. The crowd's collective cheer echoed through the air, a symphony of enthusiasm that permeated every corner of the arena. However, the jubilant cheers abruptly hushed into a sudden quiet as the attention of the entire crowd shifted towards a particular gate in the audience seating area. Ruzen High and 2 Academy sensed this as they had instinctively followed the gaze of the crowd and turned their eyes towards the same gate. There, emerging through the gate, was the team that had dominated their first round of the Winter Cup. The sudden appearance of these formidable figures created a ripple of murmurs among the spectators. "They're not leaving yet." A sense of intrigue colored the whispers that spread through the stadium. "As expected, seeing them up close does give me goosebumps." "That's right. As expected of Fukuda Soo." The murmurs swirled through the crowd, now tinged with admiration for Fukuda Soo and his team. The atmosphere was charged with anticipation as the audience, still in a collective quiet, watched Tsuna guiding his team to a reserved section of empty seats. "What's going on? Why is this whole section empty?" Agiwara inquired, eyeing the vacant seats. Nijimura chuckled, glancing at Tsuna before explaining, "We reserved the entire section." "Seriously?" Agiwara's expression shifted to one of surprise. "Why are you so shocked?" "It's a usual move for our captain," Ishida remarked, shaking his head. Haizaki and Mochizuki joined in with Ishida, nodding in agreement. Agiwara chuckled awkwardly, remembering the luxurious accommodations they'd been treated to. It wasn't exactly a shocker, considering their captain's style, and he sighed in acknowledgement. Back during the Inter-High, Tsuna had managed to secure an entire resort owned by his family for the team. This time around, despite having a spacious residence in Tokyo, he chose a 5-star hotel chain also owned by his family. "Yeah, I guess I was a bit slow," Agiwara admitted as they all settled into their seats, eyes on the ongoing game. Meanwhile, on the court. "What a flashy move!" Aomine scoffed, observing the spectacle. Kagami shook his head in agreement as he approached Aomine. Despite their rivalry, he couldn't deny that Aomine had a point. As Kagami arrived in front of him, Aomine sensed something familiar. He had felt it before, but experiencing it up close on the court solidified Aomine's certainty that Kagami's current power had reached that of the generation of miracles. "You've gotten better, hey?" Aomine remarked slowly before chuckling. "You might just be the perfect warm-up before I take on that flashy guy in the audience." Kagami scoffed and smirked in response. "No, you're the warm-up for me. I'm the one facing that guy." Interesting." Aomine raised an eyebrow, his gaze sharp, and Kagami met it head-on. "I knew he improved, but is this level of improvement even real?" Wakamatsu couldn't help but widen his eyes a bit at Kagami, who seemed to emanate an intense presence. Watching them face off, it felt like witnessing a clash between two predatory beasts. "Aomine," Kuroko's voice cut through the tension, and Aomine turned to face him as Kuroko approached, standing beside Kagami. Aomine remained silent, meeting Kuroko's gaze as the latter spoke, "This time, we won't lose." Aomine couldn't help but smirk at Kuroko's determination. "All right. Then, let's settle it once and for all, Tetsu. Aomine declared confidently. The intensity of their confrontation radiated a palpable pressure that every player on the court could feel. Miyoshi adjusted his glasses, sensing the tension in the air. He exchanged a handshake with Seirin's captain, standing before him. Wearing a polite smile, Miyoshi spoke in a friendly tone, "Let's have a good game." Haiga responded with a firm nod, saying, "Yeah, let's have a good game. He's a lot different than the last time we met." Miyoshi slightly widened his eyes, noticing the change in Haiga. He chuckled to himself, thinking, "I guess he has grown mentally as well. He's more of a captain than before, interesting." Despite having Seirin's data from Memoir and being aware of their improvement, experiencing it on the court was an entirely different matter. "This is going to be a really tough game, hey?" Miyoshi mused, glancing at the rest of the Seirin players. "This would be a tough game, hey?" Najimura's voice cut through the ambient noise of the stadium as he sat beside Tsuna. The rest of the team occupied the row behind them, their demeanor a mix of nonchalance and casual observation. The atmosphere shifted as Nijimura continued with a chuckle. "Still, is this a coincidence, or did you do this intentionally, Tsuna?" Tsuna shook his head at Najimura's question. As he felt a piercing gaze from the audience seats directly across from their section, his attention turned toward Ruzen High. "You know I don't take care of the details, don't you?" The noise from the crowd dimmed as Tsuna's gaze locked onto Akashi's. "Quite a coincidence. Don't you think, Seijuro?" Tsuna commented casually on the situation. The moment hung in the air, charged with a subtle intensity, and Tsuna responded with his trademark smirk. Chapter 139, Chapter 137, A Storm from the Start. Seirin vs 2 Academy, hey. Mibuchi mused as he observed the court. Turning to Akashi, who scrutinized the Fukuda Sogo players, he asked, "Sei, who do you think will win between these two?" Akashi paused his gaze on Fukuda Sogo and shifted it to Kagami and Aomine. "In most cases, 2 Academy should emerge victorious," Akashi stated slowly. It held true, especially with Memoir on their side, capable of gathering precise data on opponents, even predicting their future growth. However, Akashi acknowledged Kagami as a formidable player, stating, "Still, Seirin isn't an easy opponent either." This caught the others off guard, eyebrows raised in surprise at Akashi's high regard for Seirin. Looking at Seirin's track record, it was challenging to believe they could come out on top, especially after witnessing Aomine's prowess during the inter-high game between Fukuda Sogo and 2 Academy. Mibuchi, tracing Akashi's line of sight, spotted Kuroko heading to his spot on the court. He mused, "Ah, that guy was Sei's former teammate from Tiako, right?" Akashi brushed off the outcome, stating, "In the end, who won between them doesn't matter to us." His nonchalant demeanor conveyed absolute confidence as he shifted his gaze back to Fukuda Sogo. "The only one I'm interested in is you, Tsunayoshi Kazama. With me here, even Fukuda Sogo will have to bow down." Akashi's gaze was piercing. Feeling the intensity of the stare, Tsuna responded with a confident smirk, making Akashi clench his fist. "Such audacity, I'll let it slide this time." On the court, the referee's whistle echoed, marking the start of the game. The ball went up, met with cheers from the eager crowd, anticipation building as they firmly supported 2 Academy. In the heart of the court, Kiyoshi from Seirin and Wakamatsu from 2 Academy leaped, their eyes ablaze with determination. Kiyoshi's hand surged forward, meeting the ball before Wakamatsu, a swift and decisive move that set the tone for the game's opening moments as he pushed the ball toward Izuki. Frustrated by the events, Wakamatsu clicked his tongue as he retreated to his defensive position. Seirin wasted no time, swiftly advancing for a rapid attack. The game's pace intensified as the players jockeyed for the crucial first points. "The first points would be important for us," Izuki mused, his focus unwavering as he skillfully dribbled the ball forward. However, a realization dawned on him as he approached 2 Academy's defensive line. Each member of his team was meticulously marked. Izuki's eyes widened in surprise as he navigated through the tightly knit defense. Glancing at Miyoshi, who loomed before him, exerting considerable pressure, Izuki's mind raced to find openings in 2 Academy's defensive wall. "It must be surprising, isn't it?" Miyoshi's voice cut through the intensity of the court, a polite tone masking the relentless pressure he maintained on Izuki. The unexpected intensity from 2 Academy caught Seirin off guard. 2 Academy, having secured victory against them in the past, was known for their prowess. However, the question lingered: why go all out from the beginning? Izuki clenched his teeth as Miyoshi deftly swiped the ball from his hands, leaving it free on the court for anyone to grab. Seizing the chance, 2 Academy's shooting guard, Sakurai, acted swiftly, outpacing Hyaga to snatch the ball and advance with the stolen possession. The crowd held its collective breath, witnessing the swift change in momentum. Momoa, holding Seirin players' data on the sidelines, observed the unfolding events discerningly. They've grown even stronger. We can't afford to underestimate them, she muttered to herself. Her eyes remained locked on the game. The momentum shifted as 2 Academy's players surged forward, synchronized in their advance with the ball. After reaching his shooting range, Sakurai positioned himself for a shot. Hyaga, who had shadowed Sakurai's movement, displayed quick reflexes and lunged to block the impending shot. The court crackled with energy as the 2 players collided in a fierce contest. However, as Hyaga soared upward to intercept, Sakurai unleashed the shot. Hyaga's eyes widened in disbelief, realizing it wasn't a shot at all, it was a perfectly executed pass. The ball sailed gracefully through the air, ascending to meet Aomine, who was charging towards the basket with lightning speed. Aomine, propelled by the precision of the pass, soared into the air for an alley-oop. The crowd erupted in anticipation, a collective gasp echoing through the stadium. Aomine's powerful hands gripped the ball, ready to slam it into the basket with force. Yet, in the crucial moment, an unexpected hand emerged to thwart the play, which made Aomine widen his eyes in surprise. The ball slipped from Aomine's grasp, sailing out of bounds. He regained his composure as his sharp gaze darted towards the figure responsible, Aomine's expression transforming to excitement. I knew it. Playing with you should be quite a warm-up for me, Kagami. Aomine declared with a grin. It was Kagami, a calm expression etched on his face as he successfully blocked Aomine's attempt to secure points for 2 Academy. Pandemonium erupted in the stadium as the crowd couldn't contain their excitement. Cheers and exclamations reverberated through the air, and some fans were so caught up in the moment that they leaped out of their seats, unable to stay confined as the game unfolded in an unexpected burst of intensity. The game had just kicked off, and the intensity was off the charts. It was truly unbelievable. Miyoshi's eyes widened in surprise, but he quickly composed himself, adjusting his glasses. Momoa gave us a heads up, but it's still shocking to witness it on the court. Just a few days earlier, Momoa had dropped a bombshell, suggesting that Kagami had achieved something unimaginable by their standards. He had reached the level of the generation of miracles. As expected, watching those monsters clash always sends shivers down my spine, Miyoshi muttered to himself, stealing a glance at Kagami. Amidst the restless crowd, a middle-aged man sporting sunglasses strolled down the stairs, searching for an open spot. He casually observed the excited audience, remarking, "What's got these folks so worked up?" Finding a seat, he mused, "Guess I'm fashionably late." Settling in, he turned his attention to Seirin, commenting, "Let's see how far they can go this time." Removing his sunglasses, a chuckle escaped him as he recognized 2 Academy's coach. "Haha, that explains their strength. He's their coach, hey." His laughter echoed through the stands. "Knock it off, Kage Tora." A voice abruptly interrupted, causing a scowl to form on Kage Tora's face. When he turned, Kage Tora recognized another familiar face as his expression brightened. "Oh, Jen? Ha ha ha, no wonder your voice sounds like a buffet receipt. Look at your belly now. Ha ha ha." Beside the middle-aged man named Jen, whose expression had completely soured, were players in blue jackets with Kaijo High written prominently on their jerseys suppressed their laughter. It was the first time they'd heard such a comical jab at their coach, and they couldn't help but cover their mouths to contain their amusement. Chapter 140, Chapter 138, Taking the Lead. "Could you not embarrass me in front of my team, Kage Tora?" Takuchi sighed, grumbling about not being that fat but just a bit chubby. Kaijo's players were on the verge of bursting into laughter, especially when their coach mentioned being chubby. Hayakawa, the power forward, couldn't contain himself any longer. His face turned red, and he stood up, apologizing, "Excuse me, nature calls." He hastily exited the audience area, but the sound of uncontrollable laughter followed Hayakawa, causing Takuchi's expression to darken even more. One by one, the rest of the players couldn't resist and joined in the laughter. Kage Tora watched the scene with an amused expression, thoroughly enjoying Takuchi's disgruntled face. Takuchi sighed again, turning to the main culprit behind it as he asked, so, what brings you here this time? Surely, you're not that bored, right? Why? Just wanted to see how my students were doing. Kage Tora shrugged, smiling lightly as he observed the ongoing game. Students? Takuchi widened his eyes in surprise, glancing at Seirin. So, they were your students, hey? Kage Tora smiled, adding, well, I only taught them briefly, though. Meanwhile, in the game, Kuroko approached Aomine, leaving him puzzled. What's this, Tetsu? However, Kuroko didn't reply. As Izuki passed the ball to him, he went into his stance. The ball sailed right in front of him, and with a swift motion, he pushed it with his palm, spinning his arm and wrist in a circular motion. The ball, now with a unique rotation, waved through the court, heading straight for Aomine. Passing it in front of me, what a ridiculous move. Aomine frowned, lightly raising his hand to catch the incoming ball. However, as he made contact, his eyes widened in shock. Reacting quickly, he adjusted, realizing he was careless. Instead of catching it, he redirected the ball with just enough force, sending it towards Wakamatsu, who watched wide-eyed as the ball approached him with unexpected intensity. Kuroko's usually impassive demeanor betrayed a flicker of surprise as he witnessed Aomine's lightning-quick reaction to his pass as a bitter frustration crept over Kuroko. How could he react that fast? Hyga wore a thoroughly taken-aback expression. The unexpected turn of events had caught everyone in Seirin off guard, leaving them grappling with the swiftness of Aomine's response. Kuroko's ignite pass Kai couldn't make it. Aida's voice mirrored the astonishment reflected on her face as she stood up in a surprised expression. Kuroko's advanced version of the Ignite Pass, the Ignite Pass Kai had a force so potent that normal players found it nearly impossible to stop or receive. Yet, Aomine, who had initially appeared careless, demonstrated an uncanny ability to change his stance in a split second. With impeccable precision, he redirected the pass, turning what should have been an unfavorable situation into a possibly favorable one. However, why the heck did you send it my way out of all people? Despite the ball heading towards him, Wakamatsu felt a pang of frustration. He gulped, attempting to catch the ball with both hands. However, the force behind it proved too much to handle. Fumbling, he lost control, and the ball sailed out of bounds once again. This pass wasn't in the data, Miyoshi noted with a serious expression. Kuroko's unexpected new move added a layer of complexity for two Academy. Miyoshi then shifted his gaze to Aomine, who examined his palm, seemingly grazed by the surprising pass. Back in the day, Aomine wouldn't have been able to stop that. Aomine, however, wore a grin, and Miyoshi couldn't help but chuckle at the confidence radiating from him. He's not the same Aomine you used to know. Unfortunately for you, that pass won't catch him off guard anymore. Aomine is fully aware of it now, Miyoshi confidently declared. Kuroko felt a tinge of bitterness, instinctively knew full well that his pass wouldn't be able to make it against Aomine anymore. Suddenly, a comforting hand patted Kuroko's shoulder, and he turned to see Kagami, who offered a reassuring nod. It's just the beginning, Kuroko. Kagami walked to his position as the game prepared to resume. Kuroko's tightly clenched fist relaxed as his frustration was replaced by determination. His eyes gleamed with resolve as he thought, this time, no matter what, we'll win. As the game pressed on, Izuki smoothly passed the ball to Kagami, who confidently dribbled forward Aomine, determined and unyielding, closely applied defensive pressure. Kagami's demeanor remained composed, with his forms relaxed, surprising Aomine, who, in response, eased up on his defensive stance. Kagami executed a sharp crossover to the right, a move Aomine had anticipated. His hand extended to swipe at the ball, but Kagami, seemingly prepared, stepped back. In a rapid move, Kagami sent the ball to his right, where Kuroko appeared unexpectedly as if he had just emerged from Kagami's shadow. Aomine was caught off guard, widened his eyes and quickly moved to block Kuroko's pass. Despite his efforts, he was a fraction too late, and with a frown, he rotated his body, chasing after the ball. Kuroko swiftly pushed the ball into the air using Ignite Pass, directing it with precision towards Kiyoshi, who was making a determined sprint to position himself perfectly. Seeing the flawless pass, Kiyoshi grinned and exerted force beneath his feet, propelling himself into a leap to catch the ball. Seirin's bench erupted with excitement as players stood up, urging, "Put it in, Kiyoshi." However, Wakamatsu wasn't about to let it happen. "I won't let you." With determination, he shouted as he leaped to block Kiyoshi from making the basket. Kiyoshi, suspended in mid-air, poised the ball for an alley-oop dunk. Wakamatsu tried to thwart his move, but he was a fraction too late. Frustration etched on his face as he clenched his teeth. Suddenly, Aomine materialized beside Wakamatsu, swiftly raising his hand to block Kiyoshi's attempt. This unexpected interference made Kiyoshi furrow his brows. However, in a quick adjustment, Kiyoshi transformed his dunk into a pass, redirecting the ball towards Aomine's back. Kagami had strategically positioned himself beneath the basket, ready to receive Kiyoshi's pass. Aomine clicked his tongue when Kagami went for a dunk. Landing swiftly, Aomine jumped up in an instant, determined to block Kagami's move. "Not in front of me!" Aomine shouted, perfectly timed this time. Kiyoshi was surprised at how quickly Aomine responded, making another powerful jump like that was no easy feat. However, Kagami remained calm. He subtly rotated his body to the left, shifting the ball into a hook shot position. Imiyoshi's eyes widened in shock, realizing that was Aomine's trick. Aomine's eyes widened as he realized Kagami's intent. Despite Aomine colliding with Kagami mid-air, Kagami released the ball with a hook shot, scoring into the basket. The referee called a foul, granting Seirin a free throw. Seirin unexpectedly secured the first points of the first quarter, eliciting cheers from the crowd. The audience had anticipated two Academy taking the lead, but Seirin had taken them by surprise by getting ahead. Chapter 141, Chapter 139, A Setback. Is Kagami always this good? Amidst the crowd's fervor, Kasumatsu couldn't help but vocalize his astonishment. Kagami's unexpected prowess on the court had left him genuinely taken aback, and the audience's collective sentiment mirrored his own surprise. His eyes fixed on the unfolding game, Kai's observed with a solemn expression. "He's now on our level. He should do that much at the very least." On the other side of the audience, the sentiment echoed within Ruzen High's seating area. The uncrowned kings were genuinely surprised by the remarkable display on the court. Aomine was a monster to them, but Kagami's ability to hold his own against him surpassed their expectations. Mibuchi, his eyebrows furrowed, contemplated the unfolding spectacle. The realization dawned that there might be a reason Akashi held them in high regard, which seemed to be none other than Kagami. But why is he observing his former teammate instead? Mibuchi silently questioned as he observed Akashi, who was focused on the game, with an intrigued expression. Aomine observed Kagami effortlessly nailing the free throw, realizing, "I might have been underrating him. All right, let's enjoy this." Aomine grinned as the game resumed, and Imiyoshi handed him the ball. Kagami swiftly approached him, prompting a chuckle from Aomine as he skillfully dribbled the ball with remarkable speed. His ball handling skills were a dance of finesse and raw power, the basketball an extension of his hand. He moved effortlessly, weaving through defenders with a series of lightning-quick crossovers. Kagami, equally agile, mirrored his movements, anticipating Aomine's every step. The crowd erupted excitedly, witnessing the intense showdown between Kagami and Aomine. Hyga and the rest of Seirin couldn't believe their eyes. Kagami's ability to precisely mirror Aomine's every move was utterly unexpected. Imiyoshi, feeling goosebumps, thought, "This is eerily familiar. We've seen this kind of clash before." Whenever the Generation of Miracles played, such moments unfolded, whether against Kaijo or Fukuda Soo. To witness this against Seirin, Imiyoshi clenched his fist to steady his tumultuous thoughts as he observed the fierce battle between these two monsters. Instantly, Aomine burst forward, leaving a blur of motion in his wake. Based on his animal instincts, Kagami reacted with lightning reflexes, mirroring Aomine's speed. The two players raced down the court, a kinetic display of athleticism that held the spectators in awe. Aomine's acceleration was breathtaking as he swiftly changed direction, leaving Kagami trailing in his shadow. The court seemed to shrink as Aomine effortlessly widened the distance, the chase's intensity etched on Kagami's determined expression. Reacting instantly, Kagami propelled himself forward. However, Aomine remained a step ahead, defying the pursuit. With remarkable finesse, he ascended for a dunk. Not so easy. Kagami, refusing to let the Aomine slip away from his defense, bellowed and launched himself into the air in an attempt to block Aomine's impending slam dunk. Kagami's outstretched hand aimed to intercept the ball's trajectory, disrupting Aomine's planned dunk. Yet, Aomine, wearing a sly grin, seemed to have anticipated Kagami's move. He cunningly retracted the hand holding the ball behind his body in a split-second adjustment. Seeing this, Kagami then realized he got himself in a trap as his body collided with Aomine. Aomine released the ball mid-collision, which the referee then called a foul. Ha! Trying to pull off the same trick as me? You're 1,000 years too early to beat me at my own game, Kagami. Aomine turned to look at Kagami and chuckled, amused by Kagami's surprised expression. Kagami scowled at Aomine's arrogance and provocation. As the game pressed on, their ongoing showdowns disrupted the power balance, with both teams struggling to contain their opponents' relentless attacks. As the game pressed on, Izuki sensed the weight on his shoulders, feeling Kagami's intense gaze urging him to pass the ball. But things won't improve if I keep holding onto it, he thought to himself. With Imyoji closely marking him, Izuki dribbled the ball. In his peripheral vision, he noticed another determined stare from someone moving closer to Aomine, seemingly ready for a challenge. Izuki quickly regained his composure and passed the ball to that person. I'll rely on you for this, Kuroko. Izuki made a decision with a firm gaze to intensify their attack rather than trying to alter the unfolding events. His aim was to create an advantage in their scoring abilities. Kagami shared a meaningful glance with Kuroko as he maneuvered past Aomine, who had to react to stop Kuroko in possession of the ball. Observing Kuroko's determined demeanor, Aomine scoffed, questioning, "What's your plan this time, Tetsu?" Kuroko took a deep breath, his eyes focused, and the ball seemingly disappeared into his hands. He initiated his vanishing drive, which had left countless defenders befuddled in the past. With a burst of speed, he darted towards the basket, leaving an afterimage in his wake. However, Aomine's instincts were on high alert as he closed his eyes. His sense was sharp as a predator imagined Kuroko's every move with his mind. As Kuroko approached, Aomine didn't fall for the misdirection. His instincts, finely tuned to the game's nuances, refused to be deceived by Kuroko's elusive movements. In a split second, Aomine anticipated the true trajectory of the ball. He moved laterally with uncanny precision, intercepting Kuroko's path with an agile sidestep. Kuroko, expecting Aomine to be caught off guard, was in disbelief as the vanishing drive failed to bewilder his opponent as he immediately realized that he had lost the ball. Seirin players fell silent for a moment as Kuroko stood exposed before Aomine. Seirin's bench players watched in disbelief, murmuring, "Even Kuroko's vanishing drive didn't make a dent, hey. A shadow can never beat a light, Tetsu." Aomine confidently secured the ball, leaving a casual remark before swiftly advancing through Seirin's unprepared and vulnerable defense. Kagami, regaining his focus after Kuroko's unsuccessful move, had no time to console the seemingly dazed Kuroko. He kicked into action and chased after Aomine. However, Kagami's efforts were in vain as Aomine scored for 2 Academy effortlessly. Seirin's coach, Aida, frowned deeply while observing the game. "This can't go on," she muttered before standing up to request a timeout for her team. Soon after, the referee called for the requested timeout, and both teams sat on their designated benches. Chapter 142, Chapter 140, Slowing down the pace. With Kuroko's vanishing drive rendered useless, it should have been a big blow to Kuroko's mentality on the court. Nijimura spoke as everyone in Fukuda Soo observed the players on the bench. Agiwara had a serious expression while looking at Kuroko before he smiled as he spoke. He might need some time, but he would definitely recover soon. Kuroko was the stubbornest person I've known, after all. Tsuna casually glanced at Agiwara before shifting his attention to Kuroko. Kuroko's impact on the court had diminished significantly since he couldn't rely on his low presence. Moreover, 2 Academy strategically passed the ball with high passes, exploiting Kuroko's shorter stature. Although Kuroko's absence put pressure on Kagami, who often used their combined skills against Aomine, without Kuroko, Kagami needed to step up his game. Tsuna observed Kagami and pondered, he's fully capable of facing Aomine on his own, but he's become a bit too dependent on Kuroko without realizing it. However, Tsuna couldn't help but be impressed by Kagami's progress. While Alexandra had mentioned Kagami's improvement during their training sessions, the extent of it still surprised him. In such a short time, he's come this far? Truly a gifted individual. Tsuna sighed, acknowledging Kagami's natural talent. Aomine had certainly made strides in his skills. It was evident that unless Kagami shook off his subconscious reliance on Kuroko, Aomine would come out on top. Kagami should already be aware of that. The more pressure he faces, the stronger he becomes. It's like having a cheat code. Tsuna shook his head as he turned to look at the scoreboard. The situation wasn't dire for Seirin, as the score was just a 2-point difference. Yet, if things persisted, Kagami might not hold up until the fourth quarter. Kagami's presence is what kept Aomine in check. We can't take him out of the game, Seirin's coach thought with a furrowed brow. Then, her gaze shifted to Kuroko, who had lowered his head in disappointment after Aomine countered his move. Kagami also noticed Kuroko's downcast demeanor following his unsuccessful attempt against Aomine, prompting him to let out a sigh. "Kuroko, take a breather for now," Aida declared, surprising Kuroko, who widened his eyes in response. Eventually, he accepted the decision with a heavy heart, lowering his head. Kuroko had been Kagami's crucial ally in facing Aomine on the court. Kagami clenched his fist, determined to confront Aomine independently. Observing Kuroko's reaction to the change, Aida sighed, offering reassurance, "Take your time to analyze our opponent this time. We've got your back." "Mitobe, step in for Kuroko for a while," Aida instructed, turning her attention to Mitobe, who acknowledged the change with a nod. Haiga, casually flexing his fingers, chimed in, "Well, 2 academies no pushover. Even though I believe in our strength, it's wise for us to dial back the tempo a bit. So, Izuki, let the ball come my way more often, all right?" The freshmen were taken aback by Haiga's laid-back appeal for the ball. Aida agreed with a nod. The game's pace had been too intense, making the players anxious. Prolonged tension wouldn't benefit them, it would only deplete their mental stamina more quickly. "Follow the captain's plan. We'll focus on attacking from the outside this time," Aida announced, and the Seirin team members nodded in agreement. On the 2 academy bench, Coach Harasawa wore a contemplative expression, placing his hand on his chin. "We need to ease up on the tempo." Wakamatsu inquired, "How do we do that, coach?" Harasawa closed his eyes, pondering, then turned to Sakurai as he opened them. "Let's shift our focus to outside plays for the moment." "What? I'm just getting into it. Why spoil the fun?" Aomine spoke brashly, prompting Momoa to give him a smack on the head. Aomine, recovering from the surprise, turned to Momoa, veins bulging from his temple. "What's with the sudden violent streak? Show some respect." "He's our coach, Aomine." Momoa scolded, puffing her cheeks in annoyance. Miyoshi shook his head and said, "Well, we may not have control over Seirin's moves, Aomine. They might just do that." Aomine changed his expression to a frown as he turned to Miyoshi, and the entire 2 academy team followed suit. Miyoshi, getting a nod from Harasawa, clarified, "The game's pace is too quick for the first quarter. It would be wise for them to ease up a bit, ensuring their players' stamina holds until the end of the game. Taking a breather is good, but it also means your opponents get the same advantage," Miyoshi remarked, eyeing Seirin. Harasawa agreed, turning to Sakurai, "So, here's the plan. Sakurai, I'll need you to step up and disrupt their rhythm a bit." Sakurai looked a bit uneasy but nodded, apologizing. The rest of the team remained silent as they also thought it was in their best interest to do that. Aomine was not pleased at all as he clicked his tongue, realizing he had to postpone his enjoyment of playing against Kagami. Soon, the timeout ended, and both teams returned to the court. To the surprise of 2 academy players, Kuroko had been replaced. Miyoshi, although initially surprised, nonchalantly shrugged. Not unexpected. His impact on the court was quite limited right now. "A sensible move," he remarked, adjusting his glasses with a thoughtful expression. As the game continued, both teams eased the pressure as they adopted a more cautious and slower pace. Izuki, who was dribbling the ball, narrowed his eyes as he spotted an opportunity and swiftly passed the ball to Haiga, who was open for the play. Haiga received the ball, only to notice Sakurai marking him closely. Sakurai's face, ashen and startled, caught Haiga off guard. "What's with that expression?" I am sorry." Sakurai stammered, his complexion growing even paler, apologizing in a fluster. Haiga's temples pulsed with annoyance as he retorted, "Fine, but don't you think you're standing too far?" Without wasting a moment, Haiga smoothly slid backward, creating a sudden gap between him and a bewildered Sakurai. How did he create that much space so quickly? Sakurai muttered in disbelief. Seizing the opportunity, Haiga leaped for a shot. Sakurai, attempting to block, was too slow, and the ball sailed flawlessly into the basket with a satisfying swish. "I don't care how sorry you are, but I won't go easy. Haiga declared with confidence, punctuating his statement with the habitual crack of his neck, a sign of assurance in his shooting skills. Chapter 143, Chapter 141, Brewing Strategies. Wow, did Haiga just pull off Alan's move from the Jabberwock? Aguilera blurted out, wide-eyed with surprise, watching Haiga execute a move they all knew well. Even if that guy was a bit slower, that's definitely the barrier jump, Mochizuki remarked, his face showing a serious reaction to the unexpected sight. He couldn't believe someone from Seirin could pull off a move like that. They seem to be trying to mess with the game's speed, hey. Nijimura remarked, watching the ongoing match with interest. In that instant, the dynamics shifted, and now it was all about scoring three-pointers. Kuroko observed the game intently. His gaze focused on the reliable figure of his teammate, pondering, Midorima managed to break my vanishing drive. It wouldn't be surprising if Aomine could do the same. His attention then shifted to Aomine, who was under close scrutiny from Kagami. Taking a deep breath, Kuroko couldn't help but crack a small smile. Looks like I gotta step up my game too, he mumbled. Kuroko then got to his feet, surprising the other freshmen. Aida noticed this and watched as Kuroko approached her. She widened her eyes a bit, noticing the change from Kuroko's gloomy expression to one of determination. What's the matter, Kuroko? Coach, I've got a plan. Kuroko said firmly. On the other side, Momoa closely followed the game as the referee finally blew the whistle, signaling the end of the first quarter. Both teams returned to their benches, gearing up for the second quarter. She had Haiga's stats in her hand, carefully going through them. Harasawa inquired, how was it? Momoa nodded, answering Harasawa's question. She then turned to Sakurai and explained, Sakurai, in the next quarter, don't get fooled by his upper body. Focus on Haiga's pivoting foot. If you catch that, you can respond better. Facing the group, she told everyone, Kuroko doesn't give up easily, so he'll probably be back on the court. She then turned to Susa, their small forward, and asked, did you check? Susa grinned and nodded in response to Momoa's question. Momoa returned the smile and looked at Miyoshi, saying, if he does make a comeback this time, Captain, I'll need you to do what we've prepared for him. If everything went as planned, Kuroko's misdirection wouldn't be effective on the court. Miyoshi opened his eyes with a small smile, got it. I'll make sure to handle it well. Aomine scratched his head in annoyance. This is getting boring. Even though Kagami was a formidable opponent, Aomine realized he wouldn't enjoy the game if it played out according to his team's unimpressive strategy. As expected, there is no one like you, Tsuna, Aomine muttered, glaring at Fukuda Soo in the audience. Meanwhile, on Seirin's bench, all eyes widened as Kuroko shared his plans for the second quarter. We can't do that too soon, Kiyoshi said, frowning. He glanced at Kuroko and added, if we follow your plan now, you'll be exhausted before the second quarter wraps up. We also understand that, Aida replied to Kiyoshi. She was well aware that implementing Kuroko's strategy would strain his delicate physique. That's why she had assured Kuroko they'd only resort to his plan if the situation took a turn for the worse. Kagami stared at Kuroko in disbelief, his expression showing it all. He'd do that much for the team, hey. I'm in, too. I'll give it my all, Kagami thought, determined. Seirin opted to stick to their initial plan. Before long, the second quarter kicked off, with both teams ready on the court. Miyoshi got the ball, made his move, and then passed it to Aomine. Missing your shadow, Kagami. Aomine said, dribbling at a slow pace. Aomine could tell that Kagami felt the heat, especially without Kuroko on the court. Kagami frowned, loosening up his stance and tapping into his beast instincts. Aomine smirked, sensing the tension, then swiftly shifted his pace, leaving the crowd in an uproar. He zipped past Kagami's defense in a flash, taunting, you're not there yet, Kagami. Without your shadow, what can you do against me? However, he felt an unexpected jab at the ball clutched in his hand, a sensation that momentarily disrupted his advance. Halting his steps abruptly, Aomine instinctively sidestepped to evade the jab. As he pivoted, his gaze met with the sight of Kagami's outstretched hand, a daring attempt to pilfer the ball from his grasp. Seizing the momentary pause, Kagami swiftly closed the distance between them, returning to the familiar position they had occupied just moments before. The court seemed to shrink around them as the two players locked into a high-stakes dance. I took back what I've said, Kagami, Aomine grinned, his competitive instinct kicking into high gear. He dribbled the ball with unparalleled agility, each movement a calculated challenge to Kagami. The court buzzed with intensive energy as Kagami shadowed Aomine's every move. You're not bad at all. Aomine's excitement reverberated through the court, a testament to the exhilarating exchange unfolding before the mesmerized spectators. As they navigated the court, Aomine reached Seirin's baseline. Kagami gritted his teeth in frustration as he noticed Aomine's intentions. With an unconventional leap, Aomine propelled himself out of the baseline, adopting an unorthodox form. With uncanny precision, he released the ball from behind the baseline, the shot soaring through the air and finding its mark in the basket from an unexpected angle. The crowd erupted into cheers, the dazzling display of skill and strategy leaving them in awe. God damn it! Such an annoying trick! Watching Aomine effortlessly pull off his formless shot, Hyaga couldn't help but express his frustration with a tongue click. Seirin took control of the ball, cautiously trying to move forward. Two Academy's tight defense was putting immense pressure on them, making Izuki, who had possession of the ball, furrow his brow. Two Academy is truly living up to their reputation. It seems we have to rely on you right now, Hyaga. With Sakurai shadowing him closely, Izuki had no other option but to pass the ball to Hyaga. Snatching the ball, Hyaga felt a sudden jolt of alarm when he noticed Sakurai scrutinizing his every move, making him think in frustration, did they really figure out the key that quickly? Despite the nagging doubt, there was no time to hesitate. Hyaga swiftly stepped back, going for his jump shot. As anticipated, Sakurai shadowed his every move, leaving Hyaga staring in disbelief as he went for the shot, only to be blocked by Sakurai. No way! They can shut that down too. The Seirin team, just as astonished, watched in disbelief, letting out their exclamations. As the game progressed, Seirin noticed that while Kagami could contribute some points, they were still at a disadvantage. Relying solely on Kagami only created an imbalance in their ability to keep up with Two Academy. Helplessly, they watched Two Academy take the lead on the scoreboard, 36-29. But when Two Academy added another point with Aomine's unpredictable shot, the referee blew the whistle, signaling a substitution. This made Seirin players turn to the familiar figure as their expressions changed. Their attention shifted solely to Kuroko, his presence bringing a glimmer of hope to the team. Seeing the optimism reflected on their faces, Kuroko smiled. Let's turn the tables. Chapter 144, Chapter 142, Unfavorable Situation. He came back a lot sooner than I thought, Mibuchi remarked aloud. Despite his surprise, he couldn't help but admire Kuroko's resilience. He's pretty tenacious, hey. Tetsuya can be quite stubborn, Akashi chimed in, grabbing the attention of the uncrowned king. He glanced at Momoa on the Two Academy bench, adding, but Tetsuya should understand that Satsuki is not someone to be underestimated. She might have something up her sleeve to keep him in check. The uncrowned kings furrowed their brows as they found it perplexing that Kuroko returned at this moment, knowing the circumstances. Tetsuya doesn't make hasty moves, he must have a plan, Akashi said, his eyes reflecting curiosity. Looks like he has high hopes for his old teammate, Mibuchi remarked, glancing at Akashi before returning to the game on the court. Akashi smirked, thinking, let's see what you've got, Tetsuya. As the game pressed on, Seirin gradually advanced, Izuki dribbling the ball cautiously. However, his eyes widened when he realized the player marking him had changed. Impressive of you to bounce back after Aomine disrupted your moves, Miyoshi thought, sharing a glance with Susa, who was now guarding Izuki. Though his focus was on Izuki, Miyoshi couldn't resist a chuckle as he glanced at Kuroko, who appeared surprised. Unfortunately, we'll have to keep a close eye on you this time. Confused, Izuki furrowed his brow while carefully dribbling the ball, with Susa sticking close. Hyaga mirrored the frustration when he noticed Miyoshi effortlessly tracking Kuroko's movements. Gritting his teeth, he muttered, even Kuroko's misdirection is useless now, hey. Momoa observed the unfolding situation with a focused and calculating gaze, thinking, regardless of your friendship with Aomine, we need to win the game to advance to the next tournament rounds. Cornered and with no alternative, Izuki made the split-second decision to pass the ball to Kagami, hoping to salvage some points for Seirin. Yet, as Kagami took possession of the ball, an immediate and palpable pressure descended upon him, a suffocating intensity that sent shivers down his spine. Instinctively, Kagami's senses screamed at him, urging caution as he pivoted, creating distance by stepping back and then swiftly crossing to the right. Beads of sweat formed on his temple as he observed Aomine. Kagami couldn't help but acknowledge the gravity of the situation. He's playing seriously this time. Aomine, fully tapping into his beastly instinct, pursued Kagami with an unyielding determination. Each movement and step became a calculated dance as Aomine shadowed Kagami's every move. The atmosphere in the stadium crackled with tension, the audience captivated by the one-on-one confrontation between these two formidable players. The overwhelming pressure emanating from Aomine was not lost on the other players of Seirin on the court. A collective unease settled over them, beads of sweat breaking out as they, too, felt the impact of the high-level battle unfolding before their very own eyes. However, as their battle continued, Kagami's eyes ignited with excitement, a fervor that matched the intensity of the showdown. "But isn't this more fun?" he declared, his words a proclamation of the sheer joy he found in the thrilling exchange on the court. In an instant, Kagami shifted his feet, altering his pace with a burst of energy that left Aomine's defense in the dust. The sudden acceleration frustrated two Academy's players, who scrambled to intercept Kagami, their disbelief evident in their attempts to thwart his advance. Yet, Kagami seemed to be unstoppable as he effortlessly weaving through two Academy's defense with a finesse that showcased his prowess. The crowd, caught in the rapture of the moment, gasped in collective anticipation as Kagami soared toward the basket, his form mid-air a testament to the extraordinary athleticism on display. Not so fast. The spellbinding moment faced an abrupt interruption, a voice cutting through the air with a declaration that hung in the balance. A hand, appearing seemingly out of nowhere, intercepted Kagami, who was on the verge of slamming the ball into the basket. The court, once filled with the electrifying energy of Kagami's ascent, now held its breath as the unexpected twist added a layer of suspense to the unfolding scene. The ball, swatted with precision, found its way to Kiyoshi, who wasted no time deciding what to do. And with a quick but decisive pass, the ball was propelled forward as it landed right in the hands of Aomine. Aomine, with a seamless transition, moved forward in a fluid motion. His agility was on full display. Kagami also reacted with lightning speed and immediately pursued Aomine. The court seemed to stretch before them, and Aomine effortlessly sliced through Seirin's defensive formation like a hot knife through butter. The crowd erupted in a cacophony of cheers, their excitement reaching a fever pitch as they witnessed the extraordinary display of skill and speed. Aomine grinned as he sensed Kagami's presence trailing him. Undeterred, he advanced toward Seirin's basket. The air crackled with anticipation as Aomine ascended for a dunk, an impressive spectacle in the making. Having caught up with Aomine, Kagami leaped into action, determined to block Aomine's attempt at scoring. However, the moment took an unexpected turn. Aomine, in a breathtaking display of agility and reaction speed, rotated his body mid-air, catching Kagami off guard, who widened his eyes in disbelief. Aomine executed a double clutch maneuver with his back facing the basket before shooting it without even looking at it with precision, effortlessly scoring more points for two Academy. The crowd's cheers reached a crescendo, a mix of awe and exhilaration echoing through the stadium. In the audience seat, Kaijo players stared in disbelief at the unfolding events. "He's way quicker than he was in the inter-high," one player remarked aloud, a sentiment shared by everyone. Kasumatsu, wearing a frown, observed the unfolding situation on the court. It's absurd to think a player of his caliber could improve so much in such a short time. However, he looked at Kais, who remained unfazed and confident. He thought, good thing our ace is stepping up, too. Kazumatsu's expression shifted as he broke into a smile. Kaijo's coach, wearing a serious expression, watched the game before addressing Kage Tora. "Looks like your players are up against a challenge here. Why? Do you think they're losing? It's just the second quarter." Kage Tora laughed, leaving Takuchi to frown, considering Kage Tora's confidence hinted at Seirin having some tricks up their sleeves. Kage Tora then shifted his gaze to Kuroko, thinking, "It's about time for you to pull out that move, kid." Chapter 145, Chapter 143, Turning the Tide. On the court, Kuroko approached his teammates, saying, "Everyone, we're left with no other option but to use that now." Hyuga furrowed his brow but eventually nodded. Kagami clenched his fist in frustration, feeling his own weakness forced them into this situation. Suddenly, a reassuring hand landed on his shoulder. He turned to see Kiyoshi, whose face bore a serious expression. Kiyoshi spoke, "Let's secure the win, Kagami." Kagami was surprised, but he took a deep breath to settle himself, closing his eyes momentarily. As he exhaled, he opened his eyes, now filled with determination. "Let's do this," he declared as the game resumed with the ball in their hands. This time, the entire team exuded a stronger sense of determination, their gazes more resolute. Miyoshi sensed the change, feeling goosebumps on his skin. He observed the Seirin players and approached Kuroko, marking him closely. In his mind, he pondered, they must have something planned. As the game unfolded, two Academy fortified their defense as they put heavy pressure on the attacking side. Seirin was searching for openings, but found themselves stymied at every turn with their attempts to force an opening met with a formidable resistance. The only glimmer of opportunity seemed to rest in Kagami, who had become the focal point for the team. However, even from a distance, Aomine's imposing presence cast a looming shadow, causing Izuki to hesitate. "We can't pick the boss monster right away," Izuki thought with a sweat, maintaining possession while Susa kept the pressure on. Izuki then passed the ball to Haiga, he hoped for a different approach. The exchange continued, with Haiga reciprocating the pass. Seirin was now caught in a delicate dance of possession, sought the opportune moment to make their move. On the sidelines, Momoa, watching with a discerning eye, couldn't shake off an uneasy feeling. The unfolding scene and the palpable tension on the court left her with a sense of foreboding. She revisited Seirin's player data, searching for any overlooked details, and her focus landed on Kuroko's information. She thought, his stats might not stand out, but his ability is the trickiest. "Just what have I missed?" Momoa muttered under her breath, her eyes fixed on the determined expressions worn by the Seirin players. The uneasy sentiment wasn't exclusive to Momoa. Two Academy's players also sensed that something was amiss and couldn't shake off a collective sense of foreboding. "We've kept Kuroko in place, and Haiga couldn't do anything to do his barrier jump." Miyoshi scrutinized the unfolding situation as his thought raced to analyze their situation. His gaze shifted to Kiyoshi, marked by Wakamatsu, and contemplated, the only option was Kiyoshi and Kagami, but passing to Kiyoshi required them to have Kuroko's misdirection online considering our defensive formation. Seirin found themselves in a tough spot, no matter how Miyoshi looked at it. Yet, an unsettling feeling nagged at Miyoshi. He mumbled, "But what's causing this unease?" Despite careful consideration, an uneasy sense lingered. A subtle but persistent discomfort permeated the atmosphere. "What are we overlooking?" he wondered aloud, uncertainty clouding his analysis. Miyoshi, having keenly felt Kuroko's presence and successfully shadowed his every move, found it inconceivable to lose track of him at this point. However, a shocking realization washed over him. He widened his eyes in disbelief, turning to meet Kuroko's determined gaze as he thought out loud. "How could I see you so clearly?" The moment the realization dawned on Miyoshi, a silent understanding passed between every player on the Seirin team. Kuroko, as if guided by an invisible force, subtly shifted closer to Izuki. Miyoshi, now hyper-aware of Kuroko's every move, mirrored the adjustment. Kuroko and Izuki locked eyes, a shared understanding passing between them. With determination etched on his face, Izuki altered his pace, attempting to forcefully drive past Susa's formidable defense. As Izuki closed the distance, Susa, who was closely marking him, was caught off guard as something unbelievable happened right before his very eyes. In the blink of an eye, Izuki seemingly vanished from Susa's perspective. A look of shock washed over Susa's face as he realized that Izuki had effortlessly slipped past his defense. "What in the world?" Susa exclaimed, the disbelief evident in his widened eyes. Miyoshi also struggled to comprehend the unfolding spectacle with his eyes wide open in shock. Izuki used vanishing drive. He uttered, the incredulity coloring his words. The unexpected application of Kuroko's signature move by Izuki left two Academy's players in a state of astonishment. The sudden break in two Academy's defensive formation caused by Izuki's deft maneuvering past Susa, left a visible gap that Izuki exploited as he charged toward the basket. "Fuck it, I'll stop you first." The frustration on Wakamatsu's face was palpable, audible in the click of his tongue as he found himself compelled to confront Izuki and thwart his advance. Yet, Izuki was expecting this, and as soon as he sensed the opening, he swiftly passed the ball to Kiyoshi, who now found himself unmarked and free. "God damn it!" The unfolding scene elicited a frustrated exclamation from Wakamatsu, who then realized he was being played as he reacted and redirected his focus to impede Kiyoshi's impending attempt at a dunk. "Stop right where you are, Kiyoshi Teppei!" Wakamatsu shouted, a testament to the urgency and intensity of the moment. With determination etched on his face, Wakamatsu leaped into action, closing the distance to block Kiyoshi's dunk attempt. As expected of a team who specializes in individual play, each of them is a top player. Haiga was watching the sequence with a gritted teeth expression as he marveled at the speed and precision of Wakamatsu's maneuvers. In the split second when Kiyoshi sensed the impending block from Wakamatsu, a frown creased his forehead. However, Kiyoshi was renowned as the uncrowned king for a reason as he showcased his mastery. His hand that was poised for a dunk, underwent a swift transformation mid-air. Instead of completing the slam, he orchestrated a seamless pass back to Izuki, who had positioned himself for the play. The unexpected maneuver left Wakamatsu frustrated and cursing under his breath. "Fuck, such an annoying trick," he muttered, the annoyance evident in his tone. As Wakamatsu landed and turned to confront the aftermath, his gaze fell on Kiyoshi's retreating figure, who had effortlessly returned to his position. Chapter 146, Chapter 144, Putting Everything on the Line. As the game unfolded, Miyoshi found himself breaking into a sweat. The evolving dynamics on the court had thrown a curveball, and he couldn't help but think, now, this has become a bit complicated. To think that he had such a trick under his sleeve. His gaze lingered on Kuroko, who wore a calm expression despite wiping sweat from his face. Miyoshi's mind raced with thoughts on how to counter this unexpected development. However, in a moment of distraction, Izuki, who was closely shadowing Miyoshi's every move, seized this opportunity. With swift precision, he grazed the ball out of Miyoshi's hand, orchestrating a steal that caught Miyoshi off guard. The momentum swung in Seirin's favor, and their players followed suit as they advanced in sync. "Shit, I was careless." Miyoshi cursed under his breath, the frustration evident in his tone. Reacting swiftly, he launched into pursuit, chasing after Izuki in a bid to regain control of the situation. Izuki, with his eagle eyes, instantly assessed the situation on the court. Despite Haiga being closely marked by Sakurai, he recognized an opportunity with Kuroko in close proximity. In a split second, Izuki threaded a precise pass toward Haiga. Haiga was grinning as he was also anticipating the pass as he swiftly secured the ball. Instantly, he executed his barrier jump as he stepped back after exchanging a knowing glance with Kuroko. From Sakurai's perspective, Haiga momentarily vanished before reappearing at a distance, leaving Sakurai in a reactive state. However, by the time Sakurai reacted, it was too late. Haiga, who was taking advantage of Kuroko's presence that distracted Sakurai, released a shot that sailed through the basket with a satisfying swish. The seamless execution left Sakurai in disbelief as he watched the ball bounce weakly on the ground. They can even combine it with Haiga's barrier jump. Sakurai marveled, the astonishment evident in his thoughts. The stadium erupted in an uproar with cheers and exclamations as Seirin orchestrated a remarkable turn of events. Seirin turned the table. As expected, the game is still young. They're actually this good? That's crazy. The crowd's excitement reverberated through the stadium. They were feeling even more excited over the intense and unpredictable game unfolding before their eyes. Each twist and turn of the match seemed to fuel their enjoyment. On the Ruzen High seat, Mibuchi couldn't conceal his incredulous expression as he observed the game. His words betrayed a mix of surprise and admiration. Just how could they use Kuroko's vanishing drive? Meanwhile, Akashi was sitting with a smirk on his face, seemingly enjoying the unfolding spectacle. He calmly stated, "Misdirection Overflow, it was Tetsuya's doing." "Misdirection Overflow? What is that?" Kotaro asked with confusion etched on his face. Akashi began to unravel Kuroko's technique. He can activate his regular misdirection and divert attention away from him, but the opposite is also true. When his misdirection didn't work, as you've seen a few moments ago, every single player on the court could see his presence. He explained, keeping his eyes on the ongoing game. Akashi recognized that it was time for Seirin to overcome the final obstacle and completely shift the momentum. He glanced at Kagami before adding, and Tetsuya took advantage of this. Instead of trying to divert their attention with his already broken misdirection, he gathered their attention to him. With enough coordination, as long as Kuroko was in their sight, he could draw their focus and make his teammates seem like they disappeared. The opponents, distracted by Tetsuya's presence, would be oblivious to his teammates' movements. The uncrowned kings, their eyes widened in disbelief, grappled with the revelation of such a preposterously effective technique. Nebaya directed his question to their final regular player, asking, "Can Mayuzumi pull off the same move for us?" Akashi shook his head, stating, while possible, I wouldn't permit him to. This drew everyone's attention to Akashi, eyebrows raised in confusion as to why he opposed such a technique. There's a significant flaw in that move, he explained. Akashi believed the potential benefit wasn't worth it for a team like Ruzen High. A similar conversation unfolded in Kaijo as everyone attentively listened to Kai's explanation of the flaws in Misdirection Overflow. Frowning, Kais looked at Kuroko and clarified, first, it should only be employed towards the end of the match. Just like his regular misdirection, he can't keep tricking opponents for an extended period. Considering the fact that Seirin was using it in the second quarter, they must have understood the repercussions of this. Kuroko might not be able to play in the third or fourth quarter. And he'd be completely out of stamina if he kept using it until the end of the second quarter. Kais pondered slowly, sighing before elaborating, the second flaw is that while he uses this ability, he's also exposing its secret. Kazumatsu's eyes widened in disbelief as he exclaimed, so, misdirection won't fool the same opponent? Kais nodded solemnly. If Seirin were to face 2 Academy again in the future, Kuroko's misdirection would be useless. Kaijo also looked surprised at this revelation, with one of them muttering, they're going all out just to win this game, hey. Back on the court, Kagami's thoughts raced as he found Kuroko's determination to win commendable. It's not just Kuroko, everyone's giving it their all, Kagami observed, observing each of his teammates on the Seirin. Aware that this year marked their final chance to play together due to Kiyoshi's injury, he muttered, his gaze intensifying, that's why we have to win this, no matter what. Aomine, who was guarding Kagami, was surprised when Kagami's expression shifted dramatically. A potent force seemed to emanate from Kagami, and Aomine couldn't shake the feeling that he was facing someone familiar. It's like when I went up against Tsuna. He thought, bewildered. This sensation wasn't exclusive to Aomine. Every player on the court sensed it. Players from 2 Academy stared at Kagami in disbelief, realizing that the pressure he exerted now rivaled that of Aomine. Miyoshi, however, was taken aback as a bead of sweat rolled down his face. But why does his presence feel a bit more intense? Izuki, who was in possession of the ball, suddenly sensed an intense gaze locked on him. He turned to Kagami, whose demeanor conveyed a strong desire to get hold of the ball. Izuku took a brief pause, slowing down to assess the court. His eagle eyes scanned the court, noting that Kuroko was a bit far from Aomine and Kagami. Yet, a strange confidence welled up within him, believing Kagami could overcome Aomine this time. That's right, he's our ace. I should have never doubted him. With a resolute mindset, Izuku skillfully dribbled the ball left and right, creating space between him and his marker. In a crucial moment, he executed a pinpoint pass to Kagami. Go for it, ace. You're the final piece to complete the puzzle. Chapter 147, Chapter 145, Taking over the momentum. Aomine, initially taken aback by Kagami's sudden surge in pressure, now reveled in the heightened intensity of the confrontation. His expression shifted from surprise to unbridled excitement, relishing Kagami's challenge. Show me what you've got this time, Kagami. With a determined gleam in his eyes, Aomine closed the distance between them, fully prepared to return the favor and exude his own formidable pressure. The clash of these 2 players sent a ripple of anticipation through the crowd. Every eye was fixated on the unfolding duel, recognizing it as the pivotal moment determining whether Seirin could fully turn the tables and seize momentum or if 2 Academy would stand firm against the sudden turn of event. Amidst the spectators' deafening cheers, Kagami remained strangely quiet. His mind was in clarity, completely undistracted by the external noise. The once thunderous crowd faded into the background, and in Kagami's perspective, the world was confined only to the court, with only Aomine standing right before him. It feels strange, Kagami mused inwardly as he skillfully maneuvered the ball left and right, with Aomine closely shadowing his every move. Maintaining a firm grip on the ball, Kagami executed sharp crossovers, deftly evading Aomine's attempts to stop him. Each rotation and dribble seemed calculated, like a choreographed dance. Aomine's expression remained calm, his eyes keenly following Kagami's every motion as he sought to keep the formidable opponent in check. However, within Kagami, a subtle shift occurred. I feel like I could beat anyone right now. In a burst of speed that was so sudden, Kagami seized the precise moment when Aomine responded to his rotation as if he had been waiting for this exact moment all along. He's a lot faster as well. Aomine's eyes widened, his initial calm demeanor replaced by a flash of surprise. Instantly, he propelled himself into action as he chased after Kagami. Two Academy's players also sensed the impending threat as they gritted their teeth. They were fully aware of the implications of Kagami breaking through their defense. They surged toward Kagami, attempting to intercept and halt his advance. Yet, Kagami found their movements predictable. With an uncanny ability to read their actions, he effortlessly weaved through their defense, leaving a trail of frustrated opponents in his wake. Did he get into a zone or something? Aguera's voice carried disbelief as he witnessed the unfolding spectacle from the audience seat. Kagami, who had been holding his ground against Aomine, now seemed to have undergone an inexplicable transformation, exhibiting a level of skill that defied all expectations. Nijimura shook his head at this as he spoke. No, he hasn't yet entered the zone yet. Then how did he do that? Feeling perplexed, Aguera asked. Tsuna observed the court attentively. As Kagami effortlessly cut through Two Academy's defensive formation, even with Aomine hot on his tail, he explained, this is his real form. A beast is a ruthless creature. If his earlier beast instinct was just a fledgling, this is the grown-up version, where he's cool-headed. This is the peak of his beastly instinct. As if on cue, Kagami leaped up for a dunk, sending waves of excitement through the crowd. However, a sudden shadow materialized alongside Kagami. He was fully aware of Aomine's imminent attempt to block him and could sense the impending contact, the tip of Aomine's fingers almost grazing the ball in his hand. Yet, Kagami, seemingly prepared for this as he executed a swift mid-air rotation. In a move reminiscent of Aomine's earlier double clutch, Kagami altered his trajectory. Instead of a forceful slam into the basket, he continued the motion, his back now facing the basket. In a seamless continuation, he released the ball without even looking at the basket. The court fell into a stunned silence as players and spectators alike absorbed the spectacle before them. Kagami's replication of Aomine's move left every onlooker with jaws dropped in disbelief, the echoes of shock reverberating through the stadium. Holy shit, I had no idea our ace had this much intensity. Hyaga couldn't help but think as a bead of sweat rolled down his back. Kuroko was also staring at Kagami in amazement. It seemed like Kagami had surpassed even Aomine in skill at this moment. Harasawa stood up, impressed by Kagami's move. He exchanged a nod with Momoa, who watched the game unfold with concern. Thinking it through, Harasawa considered requesting a timeout and walked over to the referee. However, something caught his eye, and he widened his eyes, only to quickly regain his composure and break into a smile. Seems like there is no need for a timeout this time. Back in the court, Aomine was equally stunned as he glanced at Kagami, who calmly returned to his position after the impressive maneuver. Kagami didn't utter a single word, as if such feats were just common for him. Ha ha ha! Such a worthy opponent! He looked at his hand, which had failed to thwart Kagami, as he burst into laughter. Aomine found amusement in the unexpected turn of events as he couldn't help but express his enjoyment. This is fun, a lot more fun. Aomine declared, his laughter echoing through the court. In Kaijo's seats, Takuchi raised his eyebrows and remarked, Harasawa didn't call for a timeout. Kage Tora also picked up on this, casting a thoughtful glance at Harasawa. He might have noticed something we missed from our seats. You know, there are moments that can only be seen on the court, Kage Tora remarked, earning a furrowed brow from Takuchi. As the game rolled on. With Kagami finished the puzzle, things took a turn for Seirin as they started closing in on Two Academy. Seirin had Two Academy's defense figured out, attacking from all angles, both inside and out. In the heat of the moment, Seirin's defense was rock solid. Miyoshi, who was feeling the pressure, was visibly frustrated as he desperately searched for a way out. Meanwhile, Izuki, who was close by, had attempted a steal. Same trick won't work twice on me, he exclaimed loudly to Izuki's attempt. Miyoshi was more cautious this time, swiftly moving to the side before passing the ball to Aomine. Aomine grabbed the ball and went straight for the basket, reigniting the intense showdown with Kagami. But this time, Kagami was on top of his game, quick and sharp, swatting the ball away from Aomine's grasp. Miyoshi, observing the scene, couldn't believe it. Even Aomine can't break through Kagami's defense anymore, he thought, giving chase to Izuki, who had moved up the court as he saw Kuroko closing into the ball. Kuroko wasted no time as he swiftly passed the ball to Izuki, who then sent it back to Kagami. Aomine was fully focused as he took a deep breath, fully immersing himself in the intensity of the match against Kagami. However, Kagami suddenly vanished from his sight, leaving him momentarily bewildered. Such an annoying trick, Tetsu. The realization struck him when he noticed Kuroko's presence nearby. Aomine couldn't help but express his annoyance at Kuroko's misdirection overflow as he clicked his tongue. In a swift reaction, Aomine rotated his body, attempting to catch up with Kagami. However, despite his efforts, Kagami had already outmaneuvered him and scored more points for Seirin. The referee's whistle suddenly cut through the air, marking the close of the second quarter. The scoreboard now showed Seirin in the lead at 45-48, heightening the emotions in the stadium. Chapter 148, Chapter 146, Lost in his thoughts. Their advantage on the scoreboard relieved Kuroko and the Seirin players. "We can win this," Kuroko mumbled to himself while looking at the scoreboard. However, Kuroko's vision suddenly darkened as his body swayed, which prompted concerned exclamations from his teammates. "Kuroko!" Just as he was about to fall, Kagami swiftly moved to catch Kuroko, his expression a mix of worry and complexity. "Are you all right, Kuroko?" Supporting Kuroko in his arms, Kagami inquired about his well-being. "Don't worry, I'm just slightly out of breath," Kuroko responded, despite his heavy breathing and sore muscles, and assured Kagami that he was merely slightly out of breath. Kagami couldn't help but shake his head at Kuroko's response. The concern on his face mirrored that of the others who had rushed to assist Kuroko in getting to their designated changing room for the first half break. The toll of the intense game was evident on Kuroko's frail body, and without Kagami's support, he would have struggled to stay on his feet. The misdirection overflow had exacted a heavy physical toll, and it was already a good thing that Kuroko hadn't lost consciousness from doing so. Kiyoshi looked concerned at Kuroko, who had clearly overexerted his body. His gaze shifted to the two academy players, and a frown edged across his face. "This is not good," he muttered as he recognized that with Kuroko in such a condition, Seirin was reverting to a situation where only Kagami could contribute significantly to their scoring. Haiga shared the same worries as he completely understood that Kuroko's absence on the court would severely impact Seirin's offensive capabilities. They had only managed to take the lead on the scoreboard thanks to Kuroko's misdirection overflow. With him sidelined, they were back to square one. "Now, without Kuroko, we're going back to where we started, hey?" Haiga thought, clenching his teeth as he pondered how they could navigate the upcoming quarters without Kuroko. In the midst of the audience, Kazumatsu's eyes followed the Seirin players as they left the court. "Now it's pretty much certain Kuroko won't be able to play in the next quarter. Two Academy would have an easier time taking over the momentum again in the next half," he remarked. Kai's acknowledged this development with a solemn nod. His gaze lingered on Kuroko, a tinge of concern evident in his expression. "Kurokaki, to think that you've gone that far just to get a grip of the momentum from two Academy," Kai's thought silently, his fist clenched in admiration. The depth of Kuroko's determination and stubbornness truly lived up to his character. Kai's muttered, "I hope it was all worth it, Kurokaki." Two Academy players who had also left the court also saw what had happened before. It was definitely worthy of respect, Imiyoshi thought as they walked through the corridor. He then smirked as he adjusted his eyeglasses before he spoke, "But we won't shy away from taking this advantage to our favor." In Fukuda Sogo's seating area, Agiwara wore a concerned expression as he kept an eye on the direction of where Seirin had left. Nijimura noticed Agiwara's worry and suggested, "You can go and meet him if you're this worried, Agiwara." Agiwara hesitated, revealing a complex mix of emotions. "No, there's no need to." After a thoughtful sigh, he responded. He expressed confidence in Kuroko's resilience, saying, "I'm sure he's all right. Besides, I knew this wouldn't stop him. I knew that he would come back again later." Tsuna couldn't help but smile at Agiwara's words, recognizing it was pretty much what Kuroko might do. Without his misdirection, there is nothing he could do. Tsuna shook his head as he thought so while eyeing the scoreboard. Yet, a glimmer of thought flickered in his mind, well, he might be able to do something if something happened in the next half, though. Inside Two Academy's changing room, Harasawa stood with crossed arms, deep in thought. His closed eyes hinted at a contemplative moment. Two Academy's players awaited Harasawa's guidance with patience. He opened his eyes and said, "Now that they can't use the vanishing drive, their defense won't be as challenging." Their defense had been chaotic, dealing with Seirin's effective use of Kuroko's vanishing drive in the second quarter. The lost momentum had impacted Two Academy's offense and intensified the pressure from Seirin's defense, making scoring even more difficult. "Let's step up our game and be more aggressive in the next quarter. We need to seize the momentum entirely," he declared with a determined gleam in his eyes. Once we have control, ease up on our pace a bit and increase the pressure on them. Harasawa had noted that during the second quarter, Seirin had to exert extra effort to score more points, depleting their stamina in the process. He was confident that if their strategy played out, Seirin would be running out of breath by the fourth quarter, making it an easy win for 2 Academy. Imiyoshi's eyes opened slightly, his polite smile revealing a hint of satisfaction as he assessed their coach's strategy. The game seemed to have fallen perfectly into their hands, and he thought, it's time to finish up the game. Hey. Wakamatsu was the kind of guy who didn't question orders much, so strategy wasn't his top concern. However, his face quickly changed from casual to sheer horror as he witnessed something puzzling. Captain, Captain! His shock was clear as day when he spun toward his captain, Imiyoshi, and blurted out urgently. Imiyoshi raised an eyebrow, asking, what's going on? With a frantic shake of his head, Wakamatsu pointed at Aomine's figure sitting on the bench with a towel draped over his head. The others also turned to look at where Wakamatsu was pointing before the realization hit them. Momwa covered her mouth with her hand and audibly gasped. The entire team turned to witness Aomine, who seemed to have completely drifted away into his own thoughts. Imiyoshi couldn't hide his shock at the all-too-familiar scene of Aomine completely lost in thought. This reminds me of when we played against Fukuda Soo, he was in a similar state. In that game, for the first time in their career, they witnessed Aomine giving his absolute best. Imiyoshi felt a bead of sweat forming as he recollected Aomine's progress. He mused, with all his improvement, his 100% has become a complete mystery once again. Will he unveil it today? Meanwhile, Aomine was oblivious to his teammates' reactions. His mind fixated on a particular player. At the game's beginning, he hadn't given much importance to it, still eagerly anticipating his next showdown against Tsuna. However, by the end of the second quarter, those irrelevant thoughts had vanished and were replaced entirely by Aomine's intense concentration on the ongoing match. Kagami had completely taken over his thoughts as an excited grin spread across his face. Harasawa regained his composure, his eyes now sharp and calculating as he remarked, leave him be for now. The others nodded, directing their attention to the coach as they sensed he had more to say. Forget about our strategy. I've got a better plan in mind, Harasawa said with a serious tone. Chapter 149, Chapter 147, title at the end of the chapter. Meanwhile, inside Seirin's changing room, the vibe was tense. Everyone was deep in thought, racing their mind to think of a way to navigate through their current situation. Kuroko's out now. We've got to find a way to maintain our lead, Aida pondered, beads of sweat forming on her forehead. Aida directed her attention to Mitobe, we need you to step up and fill in for Kuroko. Mitobe acknowledged the instruction with a nod. Aida then adopted a contemplative look, placing a hand on her chin before asking, Kagami, do you still have the stamina to keep going? The question caught Kagami off guard. He nodded, a puzzled look on his face, wondering why he was being asked this. All right, it might get tougher for us to score without you. So, I need you to keep pushing a bit longer while we adjust to their strategy, Aida explained. All eyes turned to Kagami. No problem, count on me, Kagami replied with a chuckle, showing a positive attitude. Kiyoshi believed that with Mitobe stepping in for Kuroko, their defense would be more solid. What they needed now was the perfect timing to launch their offense. As Kiyoshi predicted, Aida echoed his thoughts confidently, Kagami's handling Aomine, so we've got to bolster our defense. We'll switch to a counterattack plan and make sure you are able to use our usual run and gun. Everyone agreed with the plan. On the sidelines, Kuroko was still catching his breath as he clenched his hand in frustration. Looking at his unsteady feet, he thought determinedly, I'll recover enough stamina to get back in the game later. In the stands, the crowd remained lively, eagerly anticipating the ongoing action. Oh, there you are. A voice broke in, grabbing the attention of the Fukuda Soo players. They turned to find their coach, who seemed to have just woken up from a nap. Coach! Did you get enough rest? Alexandra shook her head a bit, jokingly remarking, I wish I could snooze a bit more. Everyone chuckled at her comment, bringing a small smile to Tsuna's face. Alexandra then took a seat next to Tsuna and asked, Taiga's on the court, hey? How's their game? It's not looking great. Nijimura remarked. He then checked the scoreboard, showing Seirin in the lead. They might be ahead now, but they're missing a key player. Alexandra frowned upon hearing Nijimura explain how Kuroko's misdirection had been a significant advantage for Seirin, leaving the guy exhausted. The break ended, and both teams returned to the court. Taiga's really got that instinct down, huh? He's catching up quick. She glanced at Tsuna, who watched the game with casual interest as these thoughts crossed her mind. Back on the court, both teams lined up, geared up for the next phase of their face-off. Their expressions were filled with determination, recognizing that this quarter would play a crucial role in deciding the winner. Seirin kicked off the action, holding the ball. Izuki braced himself as Miyoji closed in and put up a pressure on him. However, they had already planned out their move from the get-go. Without wasting any time, Izuki's eyes gleamed with resolve as he swiftly passed the ball to Kagami. Grabbing the ball on his hand, Kagami immediately burst out with a lightning speed as he weaved the court with Aomine close on his tail, shadowing his every move, determined to thwart Kagami's advance. Kagami raced toward 2 Academy's basket with Aomine completely matching his pace and closed in. Aomine's eyes fixed on the ball, ready to pounce with grin spread across his face. However, as Kagami neared the 3-point line, he executed a lightning-quick crossover, shifting the ball to his left side. Aomine seemed to have anticipated the move as he began to rotate his body to block Kagami's path. But Kagami also demonstrated his agility and abruptly changed direction, leaving Aomine momentarily off balance. The crowd gasped as Kagami accelerated toward the basket, leaving Aomine behind. Still, Aomine managed to recover with lightning speed and immediately closed the gap with his instincts kicking in. Just as Kagami approached the rim for a dunk, he felt Aomine's looming presence behind him. Instinctively, Kagami sensed the impending block as he saw Aomine's hand stretching out to stop him, and without a second thought, he passed the ball with pinpoint precision. The ball soared through the air, gliding over Aomine's outstretched hands, and into the waiting grasp of Kiyoshi Teppei. With a resounding slam, Kiyoshi executed a powerful dunk, sending shockwaves through the gym. The crowd erupted in cheers as Seirin secured a brilliant play in outmaneuvering Aomine's defensive prowess. Nevertheless, Kagami stood firm, eyeing Aomine's enthusiastic expression before returning to his position. Without understanding why, Aomine's demeanor brought back memories of their showdown against Fukuda High in the preliminaries. He gripped his chest, feeling his heart pound hard. Goosebumps ran over him as his instincts picked up on something familiar in Aomine's presence. With a heavy heart, Kagami came to a realization. His expression hardened as he muttered, "The battle is far from finished." As the game rolled on, Seirin couldn't figure out why 2 Academy kept passing the ball to Aomine when they had a better chance of scoring from the other side. This puzzling strategy left them uneasy, and as time passed, the tension in the air grew stronger. Kagami felt the same, his hair practically standing on end the longer he faced off against Aomine. "I just don't get it," Mibuchi said with a confused expression as he watched from the audience. 2 Academy wouldn't be trailing so much if they didn't insist on getting the ball into Aomine's hands. Seirin was in the lead, with Kagami successfully containing Aomine. Out of the blue, Akashi chuckled, catching everyone's attention. "Oh? So, this is how it is, huh?" He sensed it. A tingling sensation ran down Akashi's skin as he observed Aomine, his face lighting up with interest. He probably can't hear a thing right now. Understanding Aomine's perspective, Akashi remarked, "That guy is completely absorbed in the game." Mibuchi was about to question Akashi's statement when a shiver ran down his spine. He quickly turned his attention back to the ongoing match, and the same reaction echoed among the others as they gazed at Aomine in disbelief. "He's radiating so much pressure," Mibuchi murmured to himself. Not just that, that pressure felt familiar. It was a sensation they had all experienced firsthand. He glanced at Akashi, whose expression now seemed thoroughly entertained by the unfolding game. Meanwhile, Kagami, facing Aomine, was the first to sense it. "As I thought, this sensation," Kagami muttered, recalling their match against Fukuda. He quickened his dribbling to shake off the unease, glancing at Aomine. "This is what I felt when Midorima pulled it off. Aomine, that guy. He's entering the zone." Seirin's coach, Aida, couldn't help but stand up, sensing the mounting pressure. Others in the game also turned their attention to the source of this intense pressure. Haiga felt frustrated as he looked at the 2 Academy players' brightened faces, thinking, "So, that's why they kept passing the ball to Aomine." Aomine appeared oblivious to everything else, his eyes now glinting with dark blue streaks as he focused intensely on Kagami. What an overwhelming presence! Even though Aomine wasn't being overtly aggressive, Kagami sensed the pressure had intensified tenfold compared to Aomine's previous aggressive approach. Title: Aomine entered the zone. Chapter 150, Chapter 148, It's not over yet. Kagami's eyes narrowed with focus, beads of sweat glistening on his forehead as he felt the pressure. Aomine had entered the zone, a state where his abilities transcended normal limits, reaching his full potential. Kagami's instincts screamed to him to let go of the ball and pass it, but he knew if he did it, Seirin would be a goner. Aomine's eyes, now adorned with dark blue streaks, glinted with an intense focus that sent shivers down the spines of onlookers. The court fell silent, with the only audible sounds being the rhythmic dribbling of the ball echoing in the tense air. With a burst of speed, Kagami made his move. He dribbled with ferocity, attempting to break past Aomine's defensive stance. Aomine moved with an otherworldly swiftness. His movements seemed like a blur as he anticipated Kagami's every shift. Kagami tried quickly changing direction, but Aomine's reactions were like lightning. In an instant, Aomine's hand darted forward with supernatural speed, his fingers expertly snatching the ball from Kagami's grasp. The stadium erupted into gasps and whispers as Aomine, now in possession of the stolen ball, stood with an air of absolute dominance. Aomine immediately burst forward, the court a blur beneath his accelerated movements. Kagami was shaken but still determined and reacted swiftly, chasing after Aomine with desperation in his eyes. The Seirin players recognized the impending threat and moved to intercept Aomine. The gym echoed with the frantic footsteps and shouts of Seirin's players, each attempting to halt Aomine's relentless advance. Their faces were etched with determination. They knew that Aomine wasn't the type to pass the ball, and they didn't believe he could go on them solo. However, their attempts were futile against the sheer speed and skill of Aomine in the zone. Aomine effortlessly weaved through the defense like a shadow, leaving Seirin players grasping at air in his wake. Kiyoshi looked on with sweat rolled on his forehead as he exclaimed, as expected of our ace. He's simply the best. Seirin's defense crumbled under the weight of Aomine's zone-powered onslaught. The crowd watched in awe as Aomine leaped, and he slammed the ball into the basket with a resounding dunk, the rim shaking with the force of the impact. Did he just do that all by himself? Two academies got this in the bag. Who could possibly stop him now? He's literally a monster. Whispers of disbelief spread through the crowd, witnessing Aomine's incredible display of skills. Kagami, who had been desperately chasing Aomine, arrived just a moment too late. His outstretched hand could only watch helplessly as Aomine's dunk sealed the deal. The horror in Kagami's expression mirrored the disbelief of the entire Seirin team. Despite their collective effort to stop him, Aomine had demonstrated a level of skill and dominance that seemed almost otherworldly. As the game unfolded, Aomine's dominance on the court became increasingly apparent. Despite Seirin's valiant efforts and the whole team rallying behind Kagami, Aomine seemed like an unstoppable force. Two Academy not only caught up with the score but widened the gap, leaving Seirin in a desperate struggle to keep up. With every failed attempt to curb Aomine's onslaught, Kagami could see the desperation etched on his teammates' faces. Their expressions were now looking thoroughly frustrated and helpless. Gritting his teeth, Kagami felt a surge of frustration welled up within his heart. He understood the reason for his teammates' desperation and couldn't bear to see those expressions again. He had vowed to himself never to let his teammates face such despair, yet here they were, struggling against the overwhelming might of Aomine. This situation feels oddly familiar, Wakamatsu thought to himself as he observed Aomine turning the game into a solo performance. He really is a monster. But he's our monster! Wakamatsu exclaimed with excitement. The sentiment seemed to echo throughout Two Academy as they gazed at Aomine in disbelief. While they managed to seize the momentum, how Aomine took charge was still quite unexpected. This feels like déjà vu, Kiyoshi reflected as he observed Aomine, completely absorbed in his own world. His gaze shifted to Kagami, who appeared helpless. Kiyoshi pondered, it's unfortunate for you, but the only one who can stop a player in the zone is another player in the zone. As time passed, Aida grew increasingly tense, her eyes fixed on the unfolding situation on the court. She nervously bit her finger, trying to brainstorm a way for them to escape this tough situation. To her dismay, she couldn't find a solution from any perspective. Aomine had seemingly sealed their fate. Suddenly, Kuroko struggled to stand and moved forward. Aida snapped back to reality, trying to assist Kuroko, saying, "What are you doing, Kuroko? Don't push yourself too hard." However, when she saw the resolute determination in Kuroko's eyes, she halted, only able to watch as Kuroko took each challenging step forward. Back in the game, Kagami once again charged at Aomine, attempting to break past his formidable defense. The court echoed with his footsteps pounding as he drove towards the basket. However, Aomine, who was still entrenched in the zone, was simply unbreakable, and with a swift motion, he swatted the ball out of Kagami's hands, sending it careening out of bounds. The gym fell silent momentarily as the ball sailed toward the sidelines. As if guided by fate, the ball arced perfectly, landing right near Seirin's bench. Kagami's eyes followed its trajectory and widened as he saw a sight that caught him off guard. There, standing with a wobbly and frail form, was Kuroko. Despite his weakened state, Kuroko's gaze was as determined as ever. Kagami felt a word stuck in his throat as he witnessed such a sight. Kuroko took slow and deliberate steps toward Kagami. His trembling feet and fragile form spoke of the sheer willpower propelling him forward. The determined look in Kuroko's eyes spoke volumes about his unwavering resolve. As Kuroko approached Kagami, the resolute gleam in his eyes revealed a determination that surpassed mere effort. It was a silent declaration of unwavering resolve. Extending his hand for a fist bump, Kuroko spoke, "Kagami, it's not over yet. Let's win this." Kagami was caught off guard as he widened his eyes in disbelief. Glancing at his teammates, he sensed a powerful collective desire to seize victory despite their desperation. Choked with emotion, he turned back to Kuroko. "That's right," Kagami affirmed, his gaze reflecting the same fervent determination as his teammates. As their fists met in a resounding bump, he declared, "Let's win this."
Thanks for listening.